If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 26, Official Uniform. Meanwhile, in a more remote location, Seimeikage had been enjoying herself like few times in her life. It was a shame that it seemed her time was running out, as she received a hidden signal from Pakura indicating that everything was done, and there wasn't much left to steal. "Why are you doing this?" One of the high-ranking officials of Seimeigakure looked around at the devastation with desperation. The losses of ninjas and properties they suffered today would set the village back at least 40 years. If he were aware that their treasury was empty while they were fighting, he would attack Seimeikage to the death. "I don't know which village you're really from, but we will remember your face." Everyone could see Seimeikage's headband, but since no one recognized the symbol of Seimeigakure, they assumed it was just a disguise for the true perpetrator's plan. Their biggest suspicion was Kirigakure or Kumigakure. I suppose it was enough for today. Seimeikage knew that all good things had to end at some point. She had expended a great deal of chakra, her clothes had been ruined due to the amount of blood on them, and the few decent fighters were either dead or watching her suspiciously, unwilling to sacrifice themselves for what would be here, the will of the grass. That sounds like a slogan for drug addicts. Kicking the bodies in her path, Seimeikage provocatively withdrew under the furious gaze of the surviving ninjas who refrained from preventing the calamity from leaving their home. "Take a tally of casualties and report on the damages. After finishing cleaning up this disaster, we will deal with her," ordered one of the surviving high-ranking officials. "Go get the medicines to tend to the wounded and quickly transfer those who are worse off to the hospital. We can't afford to lose more capable ninjas." The ninjas around him nodded. Several of them felt that Seimeikage seemed familiar, but they couldn't pinpoint the kunoichi precisely. Perhaps when everything calms down, they can obtain something useful. "I need a drink," the man thought as he rubbed his forehead in exasperation. "Sir, we have a big problem." "And now what's happening?" "The medicines and medical supplies, they're gone." "What do you mean they're gone?" "Explain." "I just returned from the hospital's storage, and it's completely empty. Medicines, bandages, glucose bags, surgical tools, not even a single aspirin left." "Do you mean the kunoichi was a distraction to steal our medical supplies?" As crazy as it sounded, it seemed to be the reality. "I'm afraid that's not the worst part, sir." The man looked at the ninja with doubt. "Did they kill the ninjas who were in the hospital?" The ninja who came to report shook his head, relieving his immediate concern. "What happened then?" "I had a bad feeling and checked various places." The ninja fell silent for a few seconds, as if trying to find the right words. "Everything is gone." "Everything?" A bad feeling arose in his heart. Ninja tools from the storage, from kunao to explosive tags, the library books, technique scrolls, soldier pills, the gold reserve, and even the emergency food storage. Everything has been emptied. The weirdest part is that not even the training dummy used by the Ninja Academy students was left behind. The ninja waited for a reprimand and even a couple of blows for bringing such bad news, but seconds of waiting resulted only in an awkward silence. "Sir." Only then did the ninja realize that his boss had fainted on his feet from the shock of the news. If what his subordinate was saying was true, Seimeigakure had fallen into ruin, and the possibility of continuing to exist as a ninja village was minuscule as soon as news of their situation spread. Meanwhile, back on the Sky Island. "I admit, I knew you would score a good haul, but you've still exceeded my expectations," Enel admitted after Pakura gave him a written summary of everything she had managed to steal, covering the deficiencies they had as a ninja village. "One could say you've stripped Seimegakure's foundations and completed what we were missing. Do you think this contribution is worth a golden apple?" Pakura asked. Of course, Enel was happy because suddenly they had almost everything they needed to properly train Haku and Kimimaro, so he tossed her a golden apple without hesitation. If Karin also decided to join, they could form the village's first official squad. Pakura happily stored the apple carefully before leaving to put things in the village's storage and make an accurate inventory in the ledger to know exactly what they had now and how many of them. "As for you, we'll need to get you some new clothes." Enel looked at Seimeikage and the pink clouds that remained on the ground wherever she walked due to the dripping blood on her clothes. It wasn't a problem, the cloud would clean itself over time before returning to its pure state. "Do you have something comfortable and sturdy?" "That will be enough for me." Seimeikage brought some spare clothes, but she was thinking of using them for her time at home as a memento of her time in Kirigakure. "I think I have something perfect," Enel indicated for her to follow him, and after going through several paths and corners, they arrived in front of a large machine. This is a cloud molding machine, and it can do many things like furniture or, in this case, clothes. Enel began to touch the high-tech panel in front of him, sliding and pressing in different places on the touch screen. For this, we'll use steel cloud silk. Light as a feather, flexible as water, and as durable as heavy armor. Does that mean you've already thought of the village's uniform? Seimeikage asked. More or less, Enel stepped aside to show her the idea. It will be a unisex adjustable version. What do you think? Quite interesting, Seimeikage looked at the design with interest. The official uniform of Seimeigakure was a blend of black, yellow, and white. While the base clothing was dark with yellow lines, it had a small side skirt and a high collar with a hood that could be adjusted in different ways to cover the mouth, the neck, or the entire head. The front had a single white stripe, and the shoulders and forearms were protected by some metal pieces. Patreon exclusive image. How long will the machine take to make it? Seimeikage asked, satisfied with the design. Not only was it practical for combat and seemed comfortable, but it also had a more pleasing design to her eyes than her old style. Go take a shower, and by the time you're done, the uniform will be waiting for you, Enel told her as he activated the automated manufacturing process. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a weapon to test. Chapter 27, Be My Teacher. After making sure that Haku and the Cloud Foxes were keeping mother and daughter under control, I prepared to test the unique weapon I possessed. I entered the same machine room I used to move the Sky Island, but this time, I headed to a different control platform even though it shares the central battery. This place was not only a safe location to have my home, but it could also be used as a weather weapon by causing different changes in the climate, as long as there was enough energy and the relevant knowledge. I could even make it snow in the warm village of Tsunade if I felt like it. That could give them quite a scare, added to the list of things to do another day. I began operating the machinery, and the sound of thunder reverberated through the sky of Seimeigakure as dark clouds began to emerge from the Sky Island like smoke from a chimney. It's important to note that this was not only the same system that Enel's arc had but had also been combined with other elements that elevated this creation to a whole new level, such as the weather knowledge from Weatheria. It only took me about 10 minutes to finish setting everything up since it was the first time I operated such a complex machine, and I had to make constant adjustments to get things back on the right track. People on the ground looked on in confusion at the sudden bad weather. It was as if their day couldn't get any worse. How wrong they were! I had to supply a considerable amount of electricity because my goal was not to create a simple storm. I wanted thunderstorms with lightning bolts several meters thick instead of raindrops. With my current capacity, this was impossible. So first, I charged the central battery to its maximum capacity and took a short break before preparing for the second assault. Thank goodness Seimeigakure was a relatively small village, otherwise, my current power wouldn't be enough, and the machinery would have to wait to be optimized by me in the future. When the indicators surpassed the green line and started reaching the orange line, I placed my hand on the large red button after lifting the glass cover that protected it from being pressed accidentally. The machine room was vibrating slightly, and when the indicator reached the red zone, I pressed the button with my thumb. A large amount of electricity was discharged into the gathered dark clouds, and a massive electric sphere of considerable size, about 30% larger than the village below, began to form. As the sphere descended slowly, the people below continued cleaning up debris and rescuing the wounded with medical ninjutsu. They searched for Mariko, and some even wanted to attack Karin given the desperate situation, but when they discovered that both of them had disappeared just like the supplies, they could only curse. I see a light, a badly injured ninja, missing an arm and seemingly having lost a lot of blood, raised his remaining arm to try to reach the light trapped in his vision. Don't go towards the light, stay with me, shouted the medical ninja as he saw his patient seemingly worsening suddenly with hallucinations. It's not necessary, the injured ninja told him as he pointed to the dark sky. The light is coming towards me, so beautiful. The medic suddenly felt that something was wrong. Since when is the afterlife light so impatient that it has to move itself? Where was its dignity as the unmovable and unreachable light until the last breath? He had a palpitation and raised his head stiffly to look up at the same sky as his patient. We're screwed, were the last words he would ever say. 1 month later. A piece of news spread through the ninja world, plunging the villages into chaos when the information was confirmed by their own people. Seimeigakure had been wiped off the map overnight. In the place where the village once stood, there was now only a semi-spherical depression with a large number of burns and carbonized remains. It took 3 days to discover the situation because a merchant who went to deliver goods to the village couldn't find it, thinking he had made a mistake. But after several rounds, he always ended up in the same desolate place, and if it weren't for some ruins deep within the depression, he might have thought it was all a dream. Everyone was trying to figure out who the culprit was, how they did it, and, more importantly, how to prevent it from happening to them. Some believed that due to its size, maybe a meteor had fallen from the sky and struck the unfortunate village, but they didn't find space rocks at the site, and the only strange thing was some reports from meteorologists that they ignored without a second thought. Meanwhile, the true culprit was busy making adjustments to the uniforms. While everyone liked the design, Enel was not a professional designer, and even though the machine was excellent, some adjustments were needed in areas that turned out to be a bit uncomfortable. The good part was that I only needed to correct those points about 4 times to reach the final version, which everyone received, including Mariko and Karin. Enel deliberately stayed away so that he wouldn't be asked if they were dead. He didn't want to go through that again and let Haku and her positivity act as the village's guide. Mariko was immensely relieved to see that she hadn't been deceived and took her new job as a teacher very seriously for teachings on chakra theory and fundamental knowledge like mathematics, reading, and writing. For practical training, Haku had Pakura as a teacher, and Kimimaro was in the same situation with Seimeikage, who ended up approving of the boy's talent and determination. Seeing the situation, Karin gathered her courage to ask Enel to be her teacher, but both she and her mother were stunned when they heard from his lips that he had no chakra. Mariko, in particular, almost went into shock because with her education, she knew that any living being had chakra. The fact that Enel didn't even have chakra pathways should have been impossible, but he was right there, eating an apple while lying comfortably in the clouds. So how did he do those things? Where did this cloud island come from? The number of questions in her mind was huge, but curiosity is not always appropriate, so she wisely decided to bury her doubts deep within her mind. Unexpectedly, Karin still insisted on having Enel as her teacher. But not to become a ninja, but to learn medicine from him. It turned out that the moment he saved her mother was etched in her memory, and she thought medical arts were great. In the end, Enel agreed to teach her about medicine while Seimeikage got another student. Chapter 28, The Door. Should I look for Tsunade and Shizuan? I wondered after handing the first medical book to Karin for her to read and memorize. I can't do things as convenient as the mystical palm technique, and I can only do a very aggressive imitation of the chakra scalpel with the power of the fruit, which is almost like a chakra scalpel. Over this past month, I had inherited knowledge and skills every night, and now the content in my head could dazzle Tsunade as long as it didn't involve chakra. The reason being that I hadn't downloaded the knowledge from people like Tsunade and Orochimaru yet. Wait, doesn't that mean that if I wait long enough, I can impart these techniques without needing to see Princess Senju? Not only that, the Yin Seal and Super Strength would also be obtained and passed on to Karin. But after thinking about it for a bit, I decided that I still wanted to try to meet this princess and her vast land holdings. The reason was straightforward: knowledge is good, but experience is priceless. I couldn't teach Tsunade's secret techniques to Karin and then go ask Tsunade herself if her student had learned the techniques she hadn't yet passed on to anyone. But asking her for some advice on more general techniques like the mystical palm should be fine. I just have to use money and bets to tempt her. Doesn't want to do it? Well, ask the sensible, very much in need of money for food and a place to sleep, Shizuan for advice. It would also be great to get some of her genetic material, just invite her for some drinks and then save them. The saliva on the edge will be enough for your purposes. But before anything else, I need to visit Kaha. Currently, I had genetic material from the Yuki, Kagaya, and Uzumaki clans. Dead skin, falling hair, it's too easy to get these things. I even got a bit of Terumime when I helped pack up Seimeikage's things since some of her hair fell into the boxes and I found it while helping my fiancé settle in. But now my interest is in obtaining some standout samples from Kaha, with very specific goals in mind. Why do I want to start collecting these things Orochimaru style? Well, one of the reasons was to create a capable lab assistant. While Karin in the future would be able to use the advanced laboratory, the restricted lower laboratory is more delicate and can't wait for years to have someone capable and loyal enough. And for that, I was going to use Mayuri Kuratsuka's knowledge. In fact, his 2 current plans primarily involve his technology and research. I wonder how Mariko is doing with the seals I asked her for. I mused as I rubbed my chin while walking. Her request, according to Mariko, was a bit complicated not only because it involved space-time seals but also because the village was constantly moving, and precise coordinates needed to be anchored. So when she wasn't spending time as a teacher or a mother, she devoted herself to the project so that the people of the village could come and go without needing Enel to take them with him when he left. Mariko, how are you doing with the gate of the village seals? Karen's mother turned her head and nodded, looking much less emaciated than when she arrived, and her improved mood was reflected in her better demeanor. Lord Enel, things are progressing well. At the end of the day, Haku rubbed off on you in how you address me, I sighed in consternation. Well, you saved my daughter and me from hell, I think that deserves at least some respect, Mariko commented in a more informal tone. You're also Karen's medicine teacher and the Kage of this village, after all. Yeah, I get it, I'm great, I stopped her because I'm sure she'll come up with more valid reasons just to tease me. In any case, how much progress have you made with this? The part here is almost complete, I'll finish it by this afternoon at the latest, Mariko explained, pointing to a pile of lines that undoubtedly screamed sealing jutsu but which I had no idea how they worked. I just need to establish some points on the ground as possible exits and design a return seal, similar to the summoning technique. Good, I'll look for discrete locations for that, I nodded, satisfied with the progress. From how she explained it to me the first time, I thought it would take about half a year or something. And what about the other thing I mentioned? It will be ready in 3 days, it's not that complicated to achieve, I just focused on finishing this first. I asked Mariko for some storage scrolls that didn't require chakra to activate, or at least not in the conventional way. The scrolls would already be charged with chakra by their ink, and all I had to do was place things on top of them to be sealed. Then, I could come back and retrieve the items in the lab, but it's a pity that this system causes the scroll to be destroyed in the process when the chakra is depleted during the expulsion of its contents. Perhaps I can make some more durable scrolls in the future, but for now, this is sufficient. I'll go from having to carry a huge bag on my back to a belt with manageable palm-sized scrolls, it's already a substantial improvement. Chapter 29, Flowers on the Graves. Walking along the main roads, surrounded by forests and small streams, feels peaceful. Pakura was kind enough to share the world map with me and explain which routes to follow to reach Konoha without too many inconveniences, thanks to my abilities. I left the village a few kilometers from Konoha to avoid taking too long but enough to relax a bit. Seimeigakure is training Kimimaro, and when she found out that Mariko had almost finished the seals, she looked for her to try to get her to work on the weapon from Seimeigakure that we took when we left there. As I approached the village famous for having the greatest darkness among the 5, I could sense several people hidden in the trees observing me with mantra. They are probably ANBU patrols, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were some from route mixed among their ranks. Contacting Danzo shouldn't be too complicated later if I see the need. I'll try to obtain samples from different clans on my own, and for those that prove to be too problematic, I have no doubt I can buy them from him, although the price he'll demand in return will likely be very high. Although there are many clans in Konoha, I have some quite specific ones in mind as a priority for my purposes: Hyuga, Inyazuka, Nara, and Senju. The genetic material of the Nara clan and the Senju clan will be combined with what I obtained from Kimimaro after curing his illness, along with that of Karin and her mother, to gather the best conditions when creating my laboratory assistant. The intelligence of the Nara clan, along with a Senju physique, supported by Kagaya clan bones and the overall recovery of the Uzumaki clan. Yes, I am preparing to create my version of Nimyo Kuratsuki. And I must point out that this will only form the foundation. As I obtain more samples, I'll be able to upgrade my assistant. Furthermore, if I need more labor in the restricted laboratory or to manage village affairs, I can always create more based on Vinsmoke Judge's cloning technology, but with a more perfect version thanks to the additional knowledge I'll have. As for the genetic material of the Hyuga and Inyazuka clans, they are for 2 completely different purposes, and while I know one is feasible, I need to conduct some tests to confirm the viability of the second. Why am I not interested in the Uchiha clan, unlike all the other transmigrators who almost have an erection every time they are born or obtain those eyes by any means possible? They all turn into proud psychopaths with extreme ideals once they grow up, and every time someone uses those eyes, it's like possessing a curse. I don't have the plot armor, so I'm not foolish enough to risk coming into contact with that poison. Perhaps in 5 years, when the Uchiha massacre occurs, I'll steal some bodies to have samples to study out of curiosity, but nothing more. I'm immune to genjutsu and so fast that even if they can see me, they can't keep up with my reactions, so the beloved and coveted Sharingan can go to hell. Oh, I see more people starting to appear around me, so I must be near the village entrance. And as I expected, a few minutes later, I see two large gates wide open as people enter and exit, occasionally with some transport or cargo carriages. Do they use such large gates for some particular reason? Hello, may I know what brings you to the village? One of the guards asks as he approaches me, lifting his head to look at my face. Tourism, I replied, which is the same as saying nothing at all. I see people with a very suspicious look entering without being stopped, so I think the reason for my attention is my height or the headband I have on my thigh. I see, he writes something on a piece of paper with a pen, perhaps a questionnaire. Did he think they still used ink brushes here? It must be one of those inconsistent things in this world. Would you kindly tell me which village you are affiliated with? We have no record of your headband. Ah, it was indeed the headband that caught their attention. One would expect that going shirtless would be a public scandal, but it's hot, and many people like the builders I see are dressed similarly. I'm from Seimeigakure, the newly established hidden village of life. I see him noting the information, but it's hard not to see the disdain in his gaze and the mocking smile when he heard it was a new village. It's always nice to hear from a new comrade. Could you tell me where your village is located? No. Does he think I'm a fool, or what's wrong with this guard? He's not being professional or subtle at all. Excuse me. The guard looks at me as if he misheard. I said no. There's a reason it's called a hidden village. It wouldn't be hidden if anyone could know where it is. Anyone? I think I touched a sensitive nerve. Is it the pride of belonging to Kaha or something like that? I suppose you're right. Thank you for your time. His ugly smile trembles as he walks away. I think I didn't make a good impression, and I couldn't care less. I pass through the gates and soon realize that I'm under surveillance. How rude. Well, as long as they don't bother me, they can do whatever they want. My first stop is a classic for anyone visiting this place for the first time, Ichiraku ramen. The smell is quite enticing, and I ask for a recommendation. I see that the portion is generous, but after tasting it, my enthusiasm waned, even though I finished the whole meal out of politeness and because I don't like wasting food. Let me be honest, this ramen is not as good as they make it out to be. The noodles are a bit mushy, the vegetables are ordinary, the combination of toppings is incorrect, and the meat wasn't cooked to perfection. The only thing I considered slightly above average was the broth, in which I could sense a great effort to achieve that flavor. I think they should change their specialty and focus on soups, they would have a better future. After the disappointment, I walked to the village cemetery, but not before passing by Yamanaka Florist, which conveniently has a shop next door. What a good business sense, and deliberately read the names on some graves until I found the ones I was looking for and left some flowers on them. Rin no Hara. Kushina Uzumaki. Not only that, thanks to a summary of curiosities I read at some point, I also knew their favorite flowers and left those for them. Rin was the trigger for almost the entire plot, the point of no return for Obito. She likes white lilies. Kushina, on the other hand, was a prisoner of the village, and even her feelings for Minato were a deliberate manipulation. She was more attracted to peonies. Presenting them with flowers, even if only once, should be fine. As for the paranoid thoughts and theories of those who are watching them, it's none of their business. Let's go look for those samples, I thought after contemplating the graves for a few minutes. I turned around, and to my surprise, I found two people looking at me and the flowers I left on the graves with confusion. Mikato Uchiha and Kakashi Hatake. Chapter 30, I don't know them. Heavens, they are staring at me intensely as if trying to remember something about me. I suppose a greeting wouldn't hurt. Beautiful lady, grey boy, I said as I passed by them. I'm sure that if it weren't for his clan's commitment, Fugaku would never have gotten a woman like Mikato in his life due to his stoic character. As for Kakashi's unfeeling demeanor, it's not my concern nor do I care. Wait. Mikato called out to me and approached me. I could see some astonishment in her eyes as she noticed my height. I'm sorry, do you know Kushina and Rin? Kakashi seemed indifferent to the question, but the way his ear twitched up and down told me he was paying attention to my response while he looked at the flowers I left on Rin's grave, the same ones he was holding in his hand. I don't know them, I decided to respond truthfully since we technically never had a face-to-face encounter, and you can only say you know someone if you've seen them in person at least once. It's just that, to add some drama, I raised my eyebrows while subtly shifting my eyes to the right and spoke in a tone that seemed to convey a deep hidden meaning. Kakashi and Mikato obviously didn't believe that I didn't know them, otherwise, how would I have found out each of their favorite flowers? In fact, Enel was right. Their behavior and response indicate that they undoubtedly know them, but they seem unwilling to talk about it. Kakashi appears equally indifferent, but his mind is working at insane speeds, trying to remember if Rin ever mentioned someone resembling this man, while Mikato seemed to have understood something and was more direct. I'm Mikato Uchiha. I know this is abrupt, but could I invite you for tea at my house? I was about to walk away, but the question took me by surprise, and I stopped to consider if I really wanted to enter the den of the crazies. Do you have red tea, the sweet kind? I'm not too enthusiastic about green or black tea. I decided to go. The observers would notice that I didn't take the initiative to approach her, and it was Mikato who extended the invitation. I have some, Mikato nodded with a small smile. She was very intrigued by this man. She was Kushina's best friend and naturally knew that Kushina was the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, so she was not allowed to leave the village, and she knew all of Kushina's circle of friends. But now, this strange man with a headband from another village shows up and pays his respects to her deceased friend when it shouldn't be possible for him to know people from the outside. And he seemed too young to be a childhood friend of Kushina. Great, I'll let you taste my apples in return. Wait, is that ambiguous? Yes, judging by the shocked look Mikato is giving me, I think it sounded too ambiguous. Here, I took out 2 apples to clarify that I'm not insinuating anything, and my response is quite literal. Mothers are out of my area of interest, after all. Mikato unconsciously sighed with relief and realized that her mind seemed to have thought inappropriate things about the man in front of her, which made her cheeks blush slightly. Embarrassing, you're married, Mikato. Well, thinking about it a bit, it wasn't entirely her fault. If Fugaku were more affectionate and not so quick, she wouldn't have these thoughts so often. Hey, Grey Boy, I tossed the apples to Kakashi. Take these, a gift for our first meeting. My name is Kakashi. He furrowed his brow at being called Grey Boy but skillfully caught the apples and examined them. They seem quite appetizing. Oh, you're little Kakashi, I put on a look of realization. In that case, leave one of the apples at your father's grave for me. He was a good man. Did you know my father? Wow, that got him to turn his surprised face. I didn't know him, but my response was the same as before, with the same tone and expression that clearly suggests there's more than meets the eye. Kakashi stared at me for a few seconds before walking away, not wanting to delve further into the topic. Do your thing, I can wait, I told Mikato, who nodded and took out a wet cloth, cleaning Kushina's grave. Well, now I know why it's so clean, it seems that Mikato must come here from time to time to maintain it. I wonder if she secretly helped Naruto at some point without it being shown in the series. It didn't take too long for her to finish, and she showed me the way to the Uchiha clan compound. I must say that knowing they were secluded from the village is one thing, but seeing the situation with my own eyes is another. First, we passed through streets bustling with people, then the streets almost emptied suddenly, and when they filled up again, everyone was wearing the Uchiha clan emblem somewhere on their clothing, usually on their backs. The number of glances at me became numerous, but I didn't mind since accompanying the wife of the patriarch seems to have a deterrent effect on those who were looking for trouble with me. Mikato wasn't silent, and we engaged in casual conversation. I think she's a bit surprised by my indifference towards the Uchiha since people usually get upset, which makes her speak more animatedly. Why should I be concerned or rude to a bunch of dead people? I had to crouch several times to pass through the gates, and after a while, I was sitting cross-legged in a tatami-floored living room with a steaming cup of tea in my hand. So, Enel, do you remember Kushina now? Oh, I see what she's doing. She thinks I can't talk in public, and given that I'm now in the heart of the Uchiha clan, the possibility of unwanted listeners has plummeted. It sounds familiar. I turned my head to look at one of the doors, where I could sense someone hidden thanks to mantra. Do you want to come in and listen? Mikato opened her eyes slightly surprised and angry. This was her house, the core of the Uchiha complex. Who had the audacity to eavesdrop on her affairs? The door opened, and a boy peeked in guiltily while holding a baby in his arms. Sorry, Mom, Sasuke's hungry again, but I didn't know you had a guest, and I didn't want to interrupt. Uchiha Itachi made his appearance. Chapter 31, Could Be. Who would have expected that this boy with a brother complex would kill his entire family in 5 years? The reason? Fugaku did a great job of destroying his eldest son's psyche by exposing him to the horrors of war at an impressionable age, giving Sarutobi Hiruzen the perfect opportunity to brainwash him with his twisted will of fire. Itachi doesn't need the will of fire, what he needs is a qualified psychologist. Although it seems that the Uchiha clan holds itself in too high regard to accept that they need help from someone to fix their heads, so things ended up as they did. And I suppose visiting a doctor to treat his illness before it advanced too far would also be wise. Itachi, Mikato calmed down when she saw that it was her son and not an intruder. Her motherly love kicked in, and she selectively forgot that her son was actually eavesdropping on the conversation. Well, bring Sasuke here, she opened her arms to take her second son. I'll wait outside while you feed the baby, it would be impolite to watch a mother breastfeeding, and I'm pretty sure Itachi is secretly observing me, intrigued by the huge guest his mother brought home. Thank you, Mikato thanked me. Itachi, keep Mr. Enel company while I tend to Sasuke, please. Yes, mother. Wow, Itachi definitely has an issue, or maybe he has received strict upbringing from his father. Someone his age should call Mikato mom, not mother. I left the room and walked a bit away, finding a comfortable spot in the expensive-looking garden to sit while Itachi followed me and sat silently beside me without hiding his puzzled gaze. He has questions, but it seems he's struggling to contain his curiosity with his etiquette. Apple. I offered a piece to the iconic character, despite not approving of the Uchiha massacre. Itachi is upset, but he's not foolish. He could have limited himself to killing the members of the rebellion faction, he could have taken several children to safe places to prevent the complete extinction of the clan, and he could have done 100 different things. But instead, he exterminated the entire clan, even though he knew they were being manipulated by the village, and he rationalized his behavior, sparing his little brother. He can kill his father and mother but not his brother? It doesn't make sense. Thank you, Itachi took the apple and nodded, examining the fruit. I'm not sure if I should feel offended, it almost seems like he's checking if I did something to the fruit like injecting drugs or something. Is it part of ninja training to check what they eat every time? Which village are you from? I don't recognize the headband on your thigh, he asked while beginning to eat. We engaged in a small improvised conversation, though it would be more appropriate to say that little Itachi was conducting an interrogation disguised as childish curiosity. Listening to the questions he asked, I wouldn't be surprised if he had actually been sent by the village to gather information, as some of these questions would be quite rude or straightforward if asked by an adult. Itachi had, in fact, been assigned the mission of gathering information about this new village that appeared out of nowhere, and just when he was about to search for the target, he was surprised to find out that his mother had invited him to their home. Anxious, he rushed home and picked up Sasuke to spend extra time with him, as well as to have an excuse in case he got caught. He didn't expect that as soon as he approached the door, the giant man would notice his presence. Was he a sensor ninja? When he opened the door and saw him, he was baffled. Whether it was the strange attire, the large build, or the way he looked at him as if he knew him, Itachi couldn't recall his mother ever talking about this man in the past. But by the way his mother was sitting and offered him one of his favorite teas, which not even his father dared to use by mistake, it seemed they had known each other for a long time. Handing over his younger brother, he followed the man named Enel to the garden, where he sat as if he were at home and offered him an apple. He thanked him and looked at the fruit, trying to understand how it could appear in Enel's hand without him noticing with his trained senses. He was pretty sure there was no chakra involved, but the fruit appeared in his hand the moment he blinked. How fast were a tall person's reflexes? After making sure the apple was okay, he took a bite, almost spitting it out in shock. Could fruit be this sweet? No. He had to focus on his mission, no matter how delicious the apple was. Although now he understood perfectly why someone would use fruit for their ninja headband. The answers he got went a bit beyond what he expected. Enel seemed to have a terrifyingly accurate understanding of the village's situation in not-so-general terms, and he seemed interested in quite ordinary things. How long had his village been sending spies to Konoha to be so well informed? As for the fact that his village had been established recently, he didn't believe it at all. Such a village wouldn't have the workforce or the capability to obtain this level of information. He also tried to find out what relationship he had with his mother, but to his frustration, he always got some witty answer instead. It made him feel like his mission was exposed, but the target's behavior didn't seem to show any signs of it. The worst part was that the crucial point, gathering information about the other village, made almost no progress, if it could even be called that. He couldn't find out their location, size, weaknesses, what styles and ninjutsu they focused on, who their cage was, and so on. He only found out that the apple in his hand was a specialty from there. Meanwhile, Enel was having a great time watching Itachi get frustrated as he answered all his questions in a way that didn't actually say anything. Itachi. We heard Mikato call, and we saw her coming out with a satisfied-looking Suzuki, who had fallen asleep after being fed. Take your brother to his room so he can sleep peacefully. Yes, mother. Itachi bid farewell and took his little brother as he walked away, still baffled. He had never encountered a situation like this on a mission before. Your son needs to work on subtlety a bit, I told Mikato as we returned to the living room. I'm pretty sure she heard our entire conversation despite the distance. Did she use chakra in her ears or something? This chakra thing was really convenient. It's okay, it's been entertaining, I chuckled before picking up the now cooler tea, perfect for sipping. Speaking of children, how is Naruto? I assume he's being taken care of by the third Hokage. Mikato lowered her head, and the atmosphere became more somber. The circumstances and origins of Naruto were something that very few knew, even among the village's higher UPS. The fact that Enel knew so clearly that Naruto was Kushina and Minato's son was enough evidence for her that he was really close to her friend. Kushina, you were my best friend, but you never told me about Enel. Suddenly, a possibility shocked Mikato's mind like never before. What if this man was Kushina's secret lover? It was the only reason why he might not have known anything and yet be so close to her. After all, in the past, Kushina had complained many times that Minato was similar to Fugaku in that regard. And with all the time she was alone once she became the fourth Hokage. Well, Kushina might have been braver and more open-minded than she thought. As her thoughts wandered, she raised her head and noticed that Enel also had blonde hair, and something even more scandalous crossed her mind. Could it be? Chapter 32, An Impossible Look. For some reason, I feel that Mikato's gaze towards me changed, and it hasn't been quite right since I asked about Naruto. Did she discover my lie? No, I don't think it's that. She would surely be furious if she had found out, but I really don't understand why she's looking at me in such a strange way. She seemed quite distracted for the rest of the conversation, and when I was about to leave, she appeared conflicted, as if she wanted to ask me something while accompanying me to the entrance of the complex. Now, it's me who's curious. What the hell happened? Meanwhile, Mikato managed to get me to promise to visit again in the future and sighed as she watched me leave. Kushina, I guess I don't have as much courage as you. My circumstances are more complicated even though I also live in a gilded cage. I have 2 children, and the clan would notice the problem if I had a child with blonde hair. No. What are you thinking, Mikato? But, if she managed to keep up with Kushina, how much resistance should Enel have? Itachi looked down from the treetop at his mother, making various expressions, unable to determine what her thoughts were regarding Enel. Regret, admiration, remorse. What Itachi didn't see was Mikato turning around and biting her lower lip forcefully as she returned home, otherwise, she might have realized everything and charged at Enel with all her might. Furthermore, Mikato made a decision: tonight, Fugaku would fulfill his marital duties, whether he wanted to or not. She had to push away those dangerous thoughts that had been lingering in her mind lately, or she could really get into trouble one day if she couldn't control herself. Well, it seems that Naruto's situation is really bad, I said as I rubbed my neck with my hand while walking, letting my feet carry me. In any case, I should go and check the clans that interest me. I should also take a look at furniture stores. I need a price reference before starting to sell cloud furniture. Using my devil fruit ability, I disappeared from the street after turning a corner and evaded those who were watching me. The Inyazuka clan wasn't difficult to find, just follow the scent of dogs, and you'll find them. I need to select a suitable subject for genetic sampling, and after some thought, I decided on whom I would take samples from, some Inyazuka and Kuromaru. Kaiba's mother is currently in her prime, and being the matriarch of the clan, she is undoubtedly the best specimen. As for Kuromaru, he's Tsume's canine companion despite having the appearance of a wolf. The members of the Inyazuka clan were training with their partners and taking care of them when suddenly a small white light passed through their complex and alerted them. An intruder? But they didn't smell anything. If Enel could hear their thoughts, he would just roll his eyes. What does an elementized state smell like? How does lightning smell? The clan matriarch only had time for her skin to crawl before she felt a prick. Her companion barely looked up in alertness as he also felt a prick. Kuromaru. No, I don't sense any strange scent in the air. Tsume frowned when she heard her companion deny the possibility of tracking their intruder. The prick she felt wasn't from a mosquito, it was clearly a needle used for medical purposes. The question is, were they injected with something or was blood taken from them? No, it's better to go to the hospital to be sure. And call the clan veterinarian. While the clan tried to figure out what had happened, Enel contemplated the collected blood, resting silently in the vials, before opening one of the scrolls on his waist and using the seal Mariko taught him to safely store the blood away from prying eyes. Now, where can I find the Nara clan? I mean, I have a rough idea of what their complex looks like, but I don't know much about their members aside from the well-known father and son. I also remember there was one with Shadow Jutsu during the 4th Ninja War, but since he was sent to the front lines instead of staying with the intelligence department, I think he definitely wouldn't be a good choice. Shikaku could piece things together if I prick him and he finds out everything, so getting some of his wife Yoshino's blood might be safer. Although I need to find out if she was already a Nara before marriage or adopted the last name as Temari did, if so, her blood won't be useful to me. It wasn't too difficult to discover this information. I just talked to some elderly women living near the Nara clan, and once I engaged them in conversation, they started gossiping non-stop. I did well to ask. It turns out Yoshino adopted the last name and therefore doesn't have the Nara blood I'm looking for. Wait, Shikamaru should have already been born. But taking so much blood from a baby shouldn't be good for him. I'll just cut some of his hair so his parents don't notice. My mantra mastery is getting better, now I can distinguish between adults and children, and finding a baby wasn't too difficult. Since Shikamaru was sleeping, I simply took out some scissors and cut a good tuft of his hair. Before Shikamaru could open his eyes in surprise and start crying, I was already gone. Now I just need to get a sample from the Hyuga clan. The Senju clan? Even if I opened their cemetery graves, I don't think there would be anything useful left after Danzo made his purchases a long time ago. No, for that, I'll have to get something from Tsunade when I find her. My target for the Hyuga clan is clear, Hinata. If I understood correctly from Tonari, although I fell asleep for most of the movie out of sheer boredom, Hinata is the one with the best blood purity in the clan in centuries. Or was it Hanabi? Either way, all I know is that Hayashi seems to have the ability to make his daughters super talented or something. And Hanabi hasn't been born yet, so it will be Hinata. Although Hinata's mother should still be alive. I think they never mentioned her name, but I remember a picture where she held baby Hanabi in her arms, so maybe it would be a good idea to get samples from both mother and daughter. The question is, I don't know how the Byakugan will be able to see me since I don't have chakra. According to official data, the standard range of this dojutsu is about 50 meters, but I can't take that as a reference since I remember that it was mentioned that Niji achieved an astonishing 800 meters. Although at what age he did it, I have no idea. I think the most prudent thing would be to be at least more than a kilometer away before moving, but in a crowded place like the Hyuga clan, it will be more difficult to locate Hinata since I doubt she's the only baby, unlike the Nara clan. And indeed, I had to spend more than an hour to deduce where Hinata and her mother were. Furthermore, they were in an inner room with guards watching, and I couldn't just enter through the window like with the others. But lunchtime was approaching, and they would have to open the doors. Those few seconds are my window to enter and exit. 20 minutes later, the branch servants brought trays of food, and the moment they pushed the doors aside, my moment arrived. I even made the servant stumble to distract them from the prick. But surprisingly, I think Hinata glanced at me in the fraction of a second when I took a blood sample from her mother and carefully cut some hair from her bangs. But that should just be my imagination, right? Chapter 33, Apples? Did you lose sight of him? In one of the most emblematic buildings in the village of Konohagakure, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, listened to the report from the people he ordered to monitor Enel. We resumed our surveillance after he left the Uchiha compound, maintaining a suitable distance, but shortly after, he turned a corner and disappeared without a trace or sound, explained the ANBU with a hint of embarrassment. Hiruzen held his beloved pipe as he furrowed his brow, pondering the newcomer who claimed to be from a new ninja village. It was imperative to gather more information about him and, above all, determine his geographical location. They couldn't allow the resources and land available to their village to be diminished by newcomers. Itachi, the Hokage called, looking at the child who was kneeling next to the ANBU. What did you find out? The Uchiha clan child took a few seconds to organize his thoughts and begin his report. From what I saw and later learned after his departure, it was my mother who took the initiative to invite him to the compound when she found him in the village cemetery, although she didn't tell me the reason, Itachi explained, a little perplexed by that fact. but he continued, he seems to be a sensor-type ninja since he could sense my presence as soon as I approached to eavesdrop on their conversation. The cemetery. Hiruzen was momentarily puzzled. Do we know whose grave he visited? Itachi shook his head. He knew his mother visited the cemetery every 2 weeks, but he couldn't ascertain Enel's actions. I see. Please continue with your report, the Hokage requested as he reclined in his chair. I tried to use my age to ask covered questions, but the answers he gave me didn't provide much useful information, Itachi continued. I observed that he has a strong physique, estimating at least Takubitsu Jonin level. He must also possess a remarkable ability to conceal his chakra. You mean he can hide his chakra to pass as a civilian? No, I mean I couldn't sense any chakra from him, literally, Itachi corrected. If it weren't for his movements, breathing, heartbeat, and such, I'd think he's an incredibly realistic wax statue. That's impossible, Hiruzen responded, his surprise evident. Regardless of whether it was using a transformation technique or some other chakra-suppressing method, a living being would always emit a small amount of chakra, even when under the effects of a seal. Even he could only suppress his presence, but he couldn't completely hide his chakra. A strong physique, sensory capabilities and an unknown concealment ability, the information wasn't extensive, but at least they could start building a tentative profile. Anything else? Well, he seems to take special pride in his apples. Apples. I tried one while interrogating him, and I can affirm I've never tasted a better one. Hiruzen hoped Itachi was joking, but considering the child's psychological profile, the chances of it being a joke were terribly slim. I understand. You may be dismissed, the Hokage said, returning his gaze to the stack of documents on his desk and exhaling a puff of smoke. I think I should relax for a few minutes, he thought as he opened a drawer of his desk and took out a crystal ball, which he caressed as some images covered in steam and feminine laughter appeared. Elsewhere in the village. Strange, I have a feeling that something appeared over the hot springs house, but even after getting closer to the nearby rooftops, I see nothing in the sky. Could it be the Hokage's telescope technique? That would make sense, I better leave before he shifts his focus from his real target. I'm not worried that he might try to secretly observe me. The technique only works within the village, and I don't even have chakra. Which makes me wonder, whose chakra signature is he using to look on the women's side? Indeed, it's Jiraya's signature. Speaking of the self-proclaimed Sage Toad, I wonder where in the world he is right now. He must know about Minato's death, so why hasn't he returned to the village at least once for the funeral? Even if he doesn't want to stay in the village, why didn't he take Naruto with him? Oh, right, the Jinchuriki's identity. They couldn't allow him to leave the village. Still, he left afterward as if he feared they'd make him carry the child. What a godfather! Should I kidnap Naruto and take him to my village? Chapter 34, A Ridiculous Physique. While contemplating what to do, I saw a green blur approaching at high speed, and when it got close enough, I recognized who it was. Guy, Konoha's future blue beast. Or was it green? Yellow? Who cares? The point is, until now, I haven't been able to truly test my one-piece physique against anyone. He could make a good training dummy, and it's straightforward to bait him into a friendly competition. If I can't finish the race in 10 minutes, I'll do 2000 push UPS. There he goes again with his reckless exercise plan. While his willingness to work hard is admirable, I always found it suspicious how he can even move the next day after doing these numbers. Is it possible that Guy has a bloodline related to physical recovery? Surprisingly, the idea is actually quite plausible if you think about it objectively. It's just that his family seems to have only one descendant per generation, unlike the other clans where children come out like litters. But I won't take a genetic sample from him, who knows if I'll end up with thick eyebrows when I'm programming genes. Hey! Is it me? Guy keeps running while turning his head, and I see him crash into a lamppost, doubling over from the impact. How many lampposts has he destroyed in the past? Do you want to have a friendly taijutsu competition? I asked him. Let the youth burn. Indeed, when I said those words, he looked at me as if he had found a kindred spirit, and for a moment, I regretted my words. But I really need to test my physical abilities against someone who won't try to use genjutsu or ninjutsu on me, for a more accurate estimate of my physical strength. We went to what I assume must be his regular practice field, judging by the damage around it, and after a brief introduction, we began exchanging blows. I won't lie, his punches are fast, heavy, and well placed. At first, I couldn't even defend properly since my previous experience is based on some sports from my previous life and Enel's memories. But as I increased the percentage of strength I used, Guy started taking things more seriously when we began to exchange blows more ruthlessly. Fortunately, there was an unspoken agreement between men not to hit the family jewels. I don't know if it's because he still hasn't mastered the 8 gates or if he wanted to be sportsmanlike or didn't want to reveal his trump card to someone from another village, but he refrained from using the technique against me, even when I started gaining the upper hand in our exchanges. A clarification, my increasing mastery was due to the endurance and brute strength of the One Piece body, which also belongs to an iconic character, not the fighting techniques employed. I think I'll have to ask both Seimeigakure and Pakura to help me improve my hand-to-hand combat. I simply don't have a fighting style of my own, and when you combine that with the fact that I can release electric shocks on contact, it could result in something quite formidable. Naturally, I didn't use the powers of the devil fruit during the confrontation. 3 hours later, Guy was lying on the ground with a swollen face like a pig and covered in sweat, while I had only a few bruises on my body and still breathed normally. As for the bruise, it would probably disappear in a few minutes. After helping him move and leaving him at the hospital, where, by the way, none of the staff seemed surprised to see him, I decided to find something to eat before leaving to regain some energy. Let me tell you, Enel's body is much more ridiculous than I initially expected. It's as if being from the world of One Piece gives you a combination of the Uzumaki and Senju bloodlines, diluted, while the standout characters get a purer bloodline with more benefits. Just look at Kaido, Garp, or Linlin. My endurance is at a much higher level than expected too, and although the pain from the blows was quite sharp and unpleasant at first, it took me only an hour to adapt and have my mind focused on the fight. Could it be that, in addition to Uzumaki and Senju, there's also some Scion blood? I feel like having something sweet, but I'm sweaty, and I don't want to eat an apple with my hands like this. As I walk towards the village's exit, I come across a dango stand. Dango is eaten with a stick, and I have some money, so let's try them. Boss, give me 6 varieties. Coming right up. The boss responded. I sat at one of the tables, and it was only then that I noticed there was someone else there. I simply didn't see her because I was looking around curiously. That, coupled with the fact that she's quite young and therefore short. A young kunoichi judging by the headband she's wearing, around 14 years old. She's wearing a brown shirt, has brown eyes, and her hair is black with a bluish tint, tied in a ponytail. But I don't like her expression. It's not that she looks sad, absent-minded, or discouraged, her lifeless gaze is practically screaming that she's in a severe state of depression. She doesn't even seem to be able to savor the dango she's eating in large quantities. Your order. The boss approached and placed 6 sticks with 3 different colored dango balls skewered on each. Thanks, I paid immediately to eat in peace and leave when I felt like it, but when I handed over the money, I caught the boss's disgusted look at the girl. He didn't even bother hiding it from her, which almost made me want to give him a good shock, but I restrained myself. Let's eat first. I picked up one of the dangos and bit into one of the balls on the outside. Pretty normal. I can't say it excites me, but it's not unpleasant. In any case, I'd say it's worth the money, and it's quite cheap. Like this, I heard and realized that the girl was looking at me. What did you say? I leaned down to hear her better. It's not that I really need to with mantra, but I want to show her that I'm paying attention. Dango isn't eaten like that, she repeated after hesitating for a moment. I raised an eyebrow and looked at her intrigued because I didn't know there was a specific way to eat dango, or if she's making it up. Anyway, it seems like she needs some positive attention, and I'm in a good mood after finding out more about my body. How should you eat it? Chapter 35, Shut Up. I'm currently with my dango advisor, learning how to eat this food in the way she calls the correct one to truly appreciate the flavors. That is, eating all 3 balls at once, quite straightforward I must say, but fun. The young girl seems more cheerful after somehow spending half an hour talking about dangos, recommended flavors, and the like. But the atmosphere outside of our table is not as pleasant. No, it's not that people are giving me strange looks for getting along with a young teenager. It's more that the girl seems to be receiving all kinds of hostile and malicious glances, as if she's guilty of something. I think she noticed it too, as her movements have become a bit more tense, but since her back is turned to them, she's pretending not to notice and is trying to maintain a strong image. Why did I have to meet her here? One of the customers muttered. I thought this was a serious establishment. Because Hokage-sama allowed her to stay in the village. Yet, she's the personal disciple of that man. How embarrassing. She actually came back alive from the mission again, what bad luck. I should note that all those who are talking have headbands or ninja vests, and every time they echo each other, they seem to have less control over their voices. Really, how annoying. Hey, I stood up at my full height and looked at them, making sure to emphasize my chin-raising gesture to convey pure disdain as I looked down at them. Could you guys close your mouths? I've only heard crap coming out of them, and it's ruining my appetite and my friends. Not only did the ninja give me disbelieving looks, but even the young kunoichi had an expression of surprise, seeing me openly defend her. Seriously, what's wrong with Konoha and its stupid habit of picking on kids? What did you say, you little piece of shit? One of the hot-headed ninjas struck the table and stood up, looking at me with a reddened face. I'm not sure if it's from anger, embarrassment at being rebuffed, or if he's been drinking before coming here. Do you really dare talk about size with me? I replied mockingly, lowering my gaze to his pants. Want to compare? I can give you some time to prepare, so you don't cry from pure humiliation later. Wow, his face turned even redder. I think he understood my double entendre, and not only that. I think I hit a nerve in his pride as a man. Although it's not like he actually has any, talking in such a cowardly manner as if it were an honorable act for the village. The will of fire really stinks. This is Konoha, you better shut your mouth if you know what's good for you and stay out of other people's business, he threatened me, while other ninja, encouraged by his words, got up from their tables as well and dared to give me dirty looks. It's funny, strictly speaking, in my current state, I could wipe out a third of the village with a charged move. And these idiots think they're someone important? Bring me one of the first two Hokages, and I'll consider facing them, as they say in those Chinese novels. A light flashed in the shop, and the next thing the owner saw when he recovered from the flash was that the Konoha ninja were unconscious on the floor, emitting black smoke from their mouths. I didn't kill them, but they'll need a few days of rest before they can speak normally. You should leave. Unexpectedly, these words didn't come from the shop owner but from the kunoichi I had defended. You'll be in trouble if you stay too long. She urged me to leave before reinforcements arrived. I could see that she was on the verge of tears, and that annoyed me even more. How bad must her situation be that just defending her a little bit could move her to this extent? What's your name? I asked her. I'm Anko Mitarashi, she replied while looking at the ground. Oh, now I've connected the dots. Orochimaru must have deserted already, and quite recently at that. That explains why Anko is getting bullied. People can't deal with her master, so they transfer their hatred to the disciple to feel better. Pathetic. I knocked out the shop owner before turning to her. Orochimaru's disciple, eh? I saw her shudder when I mentioned her identity, which she probably despises at the moment, as she hasn't reached the point of determination to prove she's different from Orochimaru. Would you like to come with me out of the village? Anko looked up, surprised by the familiarity of that phrase, but she reacted well. Yes. She replied with determination and speed. The last time her master asked her that question, her hesitation led to her being abandoned by him and becoming the target of hatred in the village for her master's sins. She loved the village, and it's not like she knew about Orochimaru's cruel experiments done in secret. She found out later, just like everyone else, and was even more devastated. She only participated in one of them, and it was related to seals, nothing too out of the ordinary in her view. So why were they treating her this way? Months after her master left the village, she saw the village's other side and discovered its darkness. If they were going to keep treating her like this, what was the point of staying? In the end, they would just give her missions to send her to die, and if she managed to complete them, she wouldn't even get a thank you or any recognition. Don't you want to know anything about me or my village before making this decision? Any place is better for me right now than Konoha, she replied, with evident distress and an awareness of the weight of her words. All right, should you go to your home to let your parents know and get your belongings? Yes, I want to pick up a few things, Anko nodded, becoming restless. As for my parents, I don't have any, so that won't be an issue. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It doesn't matter. Actually, I did know, but given that I encountered her in clearly unexpected circumstances, I couldn't tell her that I know most of her future. And if she's going to join my village, we need to remove Orochimaru's backup from her body. So Mariko will have to study the cursed seal of heaven and see what she can do. Having a sealing master is quite convenient. We turned off the lights as we left to give the impression that the shop was closed, but this would only buy us some time. After accompanying Anko to her apartment, I waited outside with the excuse of keeping watch. While the teenager hurriedly stored her belongings in storage scrolls, I covertly returned to the dango shop and killed everyone present, except for the shop owner. In his case, I administered small, selective electrical discharges to his head to cut the neural connections storing the memories of today. Even if someone from the Yamanaka clan tries to find out what happened, they won't be able to because the paths they would need to traverse are destroyed beyond repair. Though I may have missed a few times due to lack of practice, so the shop owner will have to suffer from incontinence for a while and won't be able to taste salt for months. But hey, at least I didn't leave him paralyzed. I returned to Anko, and within 2 minutes, she had a backpack filled with storage scrolls. With an expression as if she had decided to turn the page and start a new life, which is precisely what she's doing, she took my hand, and the two of us disappeared, leaving behind some electrical sparks in the air. Chapter 36, Pointing out the Innocent. As Enel had expected, it didn't take long for them to discover the corpses in the dango shop due to the smell of burnt flesh, and the alarm sounded. There were no less than 6 genin and 4 chunin dead. Even Danzo was upset by the matter when he learned of the circumstances. Who has the audacity to kill so blatantly in our territory? He wondered aloud. Worse yet, they couldn't obtain any information from the bodies because their brains were fried, and it seemed that the owner had been drugged with some kind of medicine that caused him to forget the entire day. At least, these were the preliminary results of the investigation. Are you telling me that 10 ninja were killed in the middle of the village, and we have no clues about who did it? The Hokage said with contained anger in his voice. We were able to confirm by the plates and chopsticks present that there were at least 2 more people at the scene, said the ANBU kneeling before him. Right now, we are conducting DNA tests to see if we have any matches with blood samples from other villages. Hiruzen sighed, not satisfied with these results since the chances of there being matches were minimal if it had been done so professionally. Another ANBU appeared in the office a few minutes later and handed him some documents while reporting. Hokage-sama, there's one match, and the other is unknown. Hiruzen impatiently took the papers and, upon seeing the identified sample, had to give it a second look to be sure he saw it correctly. Orochimaru's former disciple, Anko Mitarashi. The Hokage murmured, puzzled. He knew the young woman, she had been going through a rough patch, becoming the target of hatred that her master had earned. He had intended to approach her within a month, the best time to instill the will of fire in her and turn her into a useful tool for the village. But he was aware of her progress in her skills, and although Anko had an affinity with fire, her current chakra reserves wouldn't allow her to leave the bodies in the state they were found. It could only mean Orochimaru. Hiruzen crumpled the documents in his hand in anger. The two present ANBU exchanged silent glances. From their perspective and the information they knew about the Sunin, Orochimaru was too careful to leave such an obvious trail by acting recklessly. It didn't seem to be his modus operandi. However, since the third Hokage was Orochimaru's master, he should know his behavior and abilities better, so perhaps there was something they didn't see that the wise Hokage did. Hokage-sama, do you think Orochimaru returned to recover Anko? It's a possibility. Hiruzen left the papers on the table as he took a puff from his pipe. What I don't understand is why. He could have taken her when he left, and from the tracking I ordered, I'm certain he hasn't done anything noteworthy other than taking on missions and indulging excessively in dangos. Maybe it's because of what he left in Anko's body. The cursed seal. The Hokage pondered, and he really couldn't think of another reason that would justify the need to recover her, as she held no further value beyond the seal. Perhaps there was something he didn't want us to discover about the seal. It's a pity that the analysis revealed so little information, and Anko herself couldn't control it. If they could reproduce the seal and it was a controllable power boost, naturally Anko's value would skyrocket. Were there any updates from the barrier team? No, Hokage-sama, the ANBU who brought the documents replied. Other than a slight momentary disturbance, there was no movement. But the barrier team checked several times, and the interval was so brief that they are certain it was just a small animal. Hiruzen nodded. It was precisely because the village's barrier was so sensitive that spies had so much trouble getting in. Occasionally, a lucky animal that had cultivated a bit of chakra would appear and trigger a false alarm. Send out a few more patrols these days, and remind them to be vigilant for any traces of Orochimaru. Yes, Hokage-sama. Meanwhile, a few kilometers away from Kaha. I know it might be a bit late to ask, but, are you sure about taking me? Anko asked as she began to realize that her presence could get Enel into serious trouble. I mean, if they find out it was you, your village. Don't worry, it's not like it's the first time, he reassured her. When we get to the village, you'll understand everything, and we'll help you with that little parasite you have, he said, pointing at the cursed seal. Parasite. Anko looked puzzled as she touched the seal. This is just a defective seal, my former master couldn't get it to work the way he wanted. It's more complicated than that, but we have time to talk. I just realized that I don't know your name or the name of your village, Anko said, somewhat embarrassed, as she rubbed the back of her neck with slightly flushed cheeks. He couldn't help bursting into laughter, and Anko joined in his laughter. They had barely spoken for half an hour and had caused quite a commotion, but Anko hadn't even noticed until this moment. Chapter 37, Copper Flute. It has been a few months since Anko joined my village, and it has been quite a spectacle to witness. She declared herself the big sister to everyone, realizing that most of the kids are younger than her, and Kimimaro, well, he didn't agree. He reluctantly agreed to play that role after a fight in which he narrowly lost, but the cost of it was that Seimeikage wasn't satisfied with the outcome and gave her special training in return. Anko was assigned to Pakura since her fighting style is more in line with hers than Seimeikage's. That, and it seems she's scared of my fiancé ever since she saw Kimimoro's training. I counted the days, and tomorrow marks 1 year since I arrived in this world, so I want to do something commemorative. For the occasion, I made a flute from a special copper alloy. It all came to me as I reflected on how foolish it was to have a gold rod to use for fighting. Gold simply isn't a suitable material for such a weapon. Carrying around a copper or brass staff or spear would be more optimal for conductivity and plasticity. But I really didn't want to lug something that large everywhere, so I made a flute. By using thunder metallurgy, I can transform it into multiple weapons or tools if I ever need them. That way, I won't need to use gold accessories for things like the scalpel I made with Karen's mother. The copper flute is shinier and more metallic compared to the wood or traditional metal like silver typically used to make flutes. This results in a sharper and more penetrating sound. Of course, I didn't forget about the design or thickness, which are crucial for its sound. The way it curves and is manipulated could influence how the sound waves move through the instrument. But thanks to my devil fruit power and mantra, it's easy to tune it as I want after playing around with it a bit. The fact that I could also play the regular flute and transverse flute in my previous life helps. It was a little hobby to distract myself after work. The flute should be heavier, but that's where my alloy works its magic, lightening and preventing material overheating. And when I get tired of playing, I turn it into an additional bracelet. Oh, right, I was talking about Anko, and maybe I should talk about how things have gone with her cursed seal of heaven. Yes, we resolved it within 2 weeks. Since Orochimaru is among the knowledge I chose to acquire, it naturally came to the point where I received that information. After passing it on to Mariko, we were able to remove the hidden snake's soul in Anko, turning it into nutrients for her. This resulted in a substantial increase in her chakra volume and the removal of the seal on her skin. Anko was so excited that she cried while hugging me, despite Seimeikage's openly jealous gaze. Seimeikage was understanding enough not to pull Anko's ear and ruin the moment. It was odd because Mariko did all the work, but she didn't step forward to claim her credit. Instead, she gave me a mocking smile, as if she knew something I didn't. What on earth did Mariko say to Anko to make her react like that towards me? On the bright side, after breaking free from her former master's shadow, Anko's personality became more cheerful, and she doesn't bother me as much with the idea of setting up a dango stand on Sky Island anymore. Now she only mentions it a couple of times a week. I've seen what those sweets do to her figure in the future, and she'll thank me in a few years. I also realized how ridiculous it was to carry storage scrolls like the ones I asked Mariko for. I can make universal capsules using Bulma's technology. It turns out that knowing something and knowing how to apply it are two completely different concepts. Still, at least I realized it early and prepared some. They don't require chakra, function just as well, and can even hold more items. Not to mention that the capsules are so small that I can carry a bunch of them with me. It would take a dozen of them lined up just to occupy the space of a regular scroll. They even share the smoke explosion effect with the scrolls. Since I was already in the lab making them, I also started producing some batches of Byakugan to sell later. The method is simple: create only the eyeballs, following the recipe for the Jigaes from Bleach, while using genetic material that Hinata's mother and Hinata herself kindly provided me without their knowledge. Why create an entire body when I'm only interested in the eyes? It would just waste resources. If someone were to enter my restricted laboratory right now, they would see a wall full of what would look like fish tanks with heads growing inside them, floating in fluorescent green liquid. Anyone who understands what a Jigai is will understand that I don't have to worry about moral reasons. They are literally artificial bodies without souls or consciousness, so they shouldn't be confused with something as shady as clones or white zetsus. Of course, before cultivating these heads, I had to perform some tests and examinations to understand what I was dealing with. After completing them, I made a small alteration. The eyes are perfectly functional, without the blind spot at the back of the neck, and they won't cause rejections once transplanted. But now comes the but. I altered their genetic sequence so that they can only tolerate a maximum of 2 connections to the optic nerves before collapsing and turning into mush. Why did I do something like that? Simple. The ease with which people replace their eyes in this world is sickening. I'm aware that if I were to sell healthy Byakugan, it wouldn't matter if the ninja who receive them die. They'll just retrieve the eyes from the corpse and give them to someone else in an endless cycle until the eyes are damaged beyond use. That's clearly bad for business, so I'm using something that traders in my old world loved to use and abused almost without consequences: planned obsolescence. The first optic nerve connection is naturally the head of the Jigai eye where the eyes are growing. Once they are removed, only one person can equip a pair, and in case of death, as soon as the eyes are removed for another transplant, they will dissolve. What if only one eye is transplanted, like AO? Well, then they still have a spare if the first one gets damaged. My goal for selling the Byakugan is Seimeigakure and Commemoration. Why not the others? Tsunade won't be able to afford it. Oh, and Raza is still alive and kicking, so Pakura holds her grudge. Maybe when Gaara takes over, he might consider buying something. Kirigakure already noticed Seimeikage's defection, who was quite upset because, according to her, the reward in the bingo book wasn't up to her standards, and since Terumi saw me with her before we left, I wouldn't be surprised if they put the pieces together. Like before, let's hope they change their cage before talking. Konohagakure. I think it's unnecessary to explain. Putting aside the reaction of the Hyuga main branch, Sarutobi would likely declare something about stealing his village's heritage, demanding compensation along with the method for doing it, and turning everyone against us, while Danzo would think something like, if he can make Byakugan, can he make Sharingan? I can almost picture him drooling at the idea of an endless supply of Sharingan. It's disgusting. Oh, and I'm not hiding that it's my village selling them. No one died in the process, and I made them myself. What explanation should I give them? In fact, maybe this nonsense about dividing the main branch and the branch family of the Hyuga clan will be broken, so they should thank me for pushing things in that direction. And no, I can't merge hundreds of Byakugan like Tonari did. I mean, I actually can, but I don't know the theory for the fusion to result in sublimation or a super weapon. But those aren't the only developments my village has had during this time. Chapter 38, A Cloud for Everyone. It all started when I was making the universal capsules. I thought, is there anything related to clouds in that universe? And then I realized something extremely practical, the Kinton cloud. It has been my project for the past few months, and it wasn't easy because it had quite strict requirements and only an esoteric idea of how it should be. I had to employ Weatheria's cloud technology and some knowledge from Caesar Clown about gases, use data from Orochimaru's research on chakra, and establish a summoning contract with Mariko's help using seals. The result was a large mother Kinton cloud that acts similarly to Katsuyu, the slug sage. Everyone in the village has to sign the summoning contract, and depending on the amount of chakra they use, they will summon a larger or smaller cloud. In their version of your world, the Kinton cloud cannot be stepped on by just anyone, and here it's the same. Living beings that haven't registered their blood in a special way in the mother Kinton cloud won't be able to get on it or even touch it. Now, everyone not only has a means to go up and down from the village as they please, but they also won't get lost even if they're outside, and I move the village since the summoned Kinton clouds can return to the mother with an order, and their speed is tremendous. The downside? Everyone has one except me, who can't use chakra, and I can only use it on the Sky Island to satisfy my curiosity. I know I don't need it, but, envy. They are really comfortable and soft. Of course, I didn't let all of Mariko's work on Fuinjutsu for moving in and out of the village go to waste, I just gave it another use. I moved the arrival point to the medical pods in the lab and tattooed a small hidden seal under the hair as a life-saving measure. The moment someone is in critical condition, under a mental command, or clinically dead, their body will return to the medical pod for emergency treatment. Now that we've solved the issue of moving between the village and the ground, let's move on to another important project. Engagement ring. I was really racking my brain to create something truly meaningful, and in the end, an idea shot out from the brain pressure. A ring made of pure gold and set with a fragment of Galil stone. I think there's no more unique and perfect combination. The downside is that pure gold will need a few years to accumulate enough material the size of a cherry, and as for the Galil stone, I need to find a ferret in a desert caravan. Let's look at the positive side. Once I have both things, I'll have enough material to make several rings if I really manage to have a harem. I said goodbye to everyone and descended to the ground, then moved to the land of hot water. They really need to improve their naming style. Since I was thinking about the engagement ring, I also looked for honeymoon destinations, and hot springs sounded great, so while checking everything, I discovered a mountain not far away with beautiful scenery. It doesn't have cherry blossom trees, a running stream, a bamboo forest, or anything like that, it just feels ancient and secluded from the world, so I decided to hold the commemoration here because it feels private enough for my taste. I took out a 10-liter alcohol gourd made from my apples. It's not cider, but something much stronger, and I'm almost sure that a normal person would go into a coma or something worse when drinking it, but the One Piece physics did its magic again, and normal liquors don't get me drunk at all. I need something really strong to feel the heat rise up my neck. I found a rock cut like a mirror, probably a remnant of a battle, and sat on it while placing the gourd beside me. Some candles I lit with a spark, and licked my lips, thinking about what melody to play. To hell with it, we're in Naruto, let's just start with sadness and sorrow and see how it flows. The sound of the flute was carried by the night wind, where the full moon rose, and I listened in silence to the music I played. At first, it was softer, but as it progressed, I got excited, and the melody gained depth. The strands of grass swayed with the wind and seemed to dance around me, following the rhythm of the sound, trying to lift my spirits. Not only is it the 1-year anniversary since I arrived in this world, but it's also the anniversary of my death, and my thoughts inevitably turn to my loved ones from the past. Those who were alive when I left, at least. How must they be now? Will they remember me? Could that person overcome my death? Before I knew it, I was playing melodies like I Will Return, I Miss You, and Missing You, among others. Although I admit the last one sounds much better when played on a piano, but I'm not in the mood to prepare one right now. After finishing the last piece, I changed the shape of the flute slightly into a transverse flute and began playing the final melody after taking a few long sips from the gourd. I decided to play Tsunade. It was calm, reminded me of my childhood, and I think it would help calm my turbulent emotions. At some point, perhaps attracted by the scent of my gourd, fireflies surrounded me while I tilted my head and blew my feelings to bid a final farewell to my old world. I feel something warm trickling down my cheeks. I know they are my tears, but I won't wipe them away until I've been able to let them all go. The moment I finished playing, the fireflies scattered, and I felt as if the moon became brighter. Maybe the rabbit princess liked the show? Had. Although I was sure she couldn't hear me from there. I wiped my tears away with the back of my hand and took the gourd to take a few more sips before turning my head to the right. It's quite rude to approach like this, don't you think? Midway through my concert, I felt someone approaching me. The only reason I haven't blasted whoever dared is that they were sensible enough not to barge in or disturb. I'm sorry, it wasn't my intention to disturb your moment, the person apologized and stepped forward enough to emerge from the shadows of the forest, letting the moonlight reveal their face. Chapter 39, Chatty Drunk. I really wasn't in the mood to confront anyone right now, let alone did I think my encounter with this person would be under these circumstances. What brings you up this mountain in the middle of this beautiful night? I asked as I raised the gourd and took another sip. For some reason, I feel like I just turned into Captain Sparrow for a second. Oh, I'm starting to feel the warmth in my stomach now. I can really hold my drink. I'm not sure either. The woman in green and grey clothes ran a hand through her blonde hair to scratch it and sighed as she approached with uncertain steps. I just heard the music and felt like I wanted to hear it more clearly, so my feet took me here without me realizing. Do you want a sip? I asked as I handed her the gourd. Careful, it's a bit stronger than usual. I've tried all kinds and haven't found any troublesome liquor until today. The woman, who wore green and grey clothes, took the gourd with familiarity, sat down, and took a long sip before suddenly coughing several times in amazement. What grade of alcohol is this? She handed me the gourd back, and I reclaimed it. Strong enough to get the job done. A little, at least. Another sip slid down my throat, pleasantly warming it. So, what can I do for the second best medical expert in the world? Second. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you haven't mistaken me for someone else? Second, I reaffirmed casually. Tsunade Senju, you have a bunch of titles, but I won't say them. You are you, and that's enough. And who is better than me in medicine in your humble opinion? Tsunade snatched my gourd, which I allowed, of course, and took another, shorter sip this time. I think she was getting used to its strength. Myself, I raised my hand while jumping and falling back onto the grass to gaze at the sky. And I don't even have chakra, so you still have a long way to go. I think you're drunk. In response to her reply, I simply raised my wrist in an obvious gesture for her to feel free to check it. It seems she decides to play along and professionally grasped my wrist while checking my chakra pathways, which I don't have. This isn't possible. Tsunade's eyes widened, and she seemed to have sobered up suddenly. I told you. I sat up a bit and took a bit more. Don't believe me? Test me, ask. Tsunade stared at me for a minute before starting to ask a series of medical and anatomical questions that I could answer without any problems. Most of them were things she knew, and therefore, I knew as well. As for the ones she didn't know, I simply used Orochimaru's knowledge or my own conclusions. How is it possible that I've never heard of you or your village? She asked, wearing a look of disbelief. The man in front of her had medical knowledge decades ahead of hers. Well, I only arrived here about a year ago and founded the village myself. We haven't gone out much, neither me nor my people, so the information is definitely incomplete, I replied. And you, how are you dealing with your fear of blood? I don't know what you're talking about, Tsunade quickly denied while unconsciously touching the necklace around her neck with her hand. It seems you haven't overcome it yet. I began to feel better after talking for a bit. I'll give her some rewards. Would you like to know who Nowake's killer is? Tsunade stood up and looked at me intensely. What did you say? If you don't want to know that, I can tell you who killed the members of the Senju clan for years. I'm sure you noticed that the death rate for anyone with your clan's blood was ridiculously high and extremely suspicious. I looked at the gourd for a second and continued. There's also the matter of Dan's orders, although you won't like it. Then there's the issue of your grandfather's grave. I took another sip. Seriously, everything is chaotic when you think about it. Tsunade was having a brain meltdown, but no matter how I analyzed the micro-expressions of the man in front of her, he seemed to know what he was talking about. Why would you tell me something like that? She asked seriously, clenching her fist. I don't know, you helped cheer me up when I was sad. That makes you my friend, I shrugged as I began to realize that maybe I'm a talkative drunk. I don't like seeing my friends sad. You're a good woman, an admirable ninja medic, and even though you're a bit rough, you don't deserve any of what happened to you. It was a really bad streak. Worse still, that bad streak was even organized. I looked her in the eyes. Besides, I'm pretty sure you can find clues or leads after hearing me. Is that all? Tsunade thought I would ask for extremely unfavorable conditions in exchange for the information. You don't want anything. You can't give me what I want, I denied. Surprise me, Tsunade sat down again, but this time much closer. I'd like you to join my village, I told her with complete naturalness. But given your love for the village your grandfather founded, I know that wouldn't be possible. How about you just owe me a favor and I'll use it when you become Hokage? I'm not going to be Hokage. Tsunade furrowed her brows. Now, spill it. Nowake, Dan, my clan, my grandfather's grave. I want you to tell me everything you know. Let's do something better. I took one of the universal capsules and opened it, revealing a bunch of books I had written to pass the time. I searched for a bit in the area where I knew I had stored it and pulled out a copy. There you go. There's also information about wood release and I don't remember what else, but it should be everything you want to know. Tsunade looked at the book with her name written on the cover in doubt but opened it and was surprised to read that there was a lot of information about things related to her from an early age. Wait. Tsunade startled and looked up, only to see the man take the gourd of alcohol and move a few meters away. Okay, you can continue. 15 minutes later. You bastards! Tsunade struck the ground using her strange strength, and the radius of her strike stopped a few centimeters from me, demonstrating why I had moved away. She had bloodshot eyes, and her murderous intent made the mountain animals run for their lives. She approached me with heavy steps, glaring at me. How much of what you've taught me is true? If you look carefully, you'll probably find something about everything I mentioned. I tried to take another sip, but the gourd was empty. I have to check. Although she could connect many dots within her, she still hoped that it wasn't really as she had read. If what's written here is true, I owe you a big favor. Wonderful. I got up and looked at the 2 or 3 Tsunades. If you're going back to Konoha, can I accompany you? I don't want to miss the event. Did I just mess with the original timeline? No, I think I did that before. It's more fun this way. Chapter 40, The Weight of Guilt. Shizun didn't understand the situation. An hour ago, her teacher was proclaiming to go gamble with the money they had just earned from treating a noble's daughter who had a pimple on her face when suddenly she looked in a certain direction and walked away before Shizun could react. Initially, she was worried that debt collectors had found them or that they were being spied on by an enemy. However, she didn't expect her teacher to return later with a cold expression, accompanied by a tall man who was naked. No, wait, he's actually wearing pants, Shizun noticed belatedly once she managed to avert her eyes from his abs and let out an unconscious sigh of relief. Her teacher had caused a lot of trouble when she was drunk and had been a headache, but ending the night with a man was never one of them. But, this only made everything stranger. Teacher Tsunade never liked perverts, she made that very clear every time Jiraya came up in conversation, and it usually ended with nearby furniture destruction. But now, she didn't seem the least bit bothered by the shirtless tall man. Had spring come again for her teacher? Shizun might have considered that possibility, but the expression she saw made it clear that this didn't seem to be the case. So, what had happened? The next few minutes of conversation made her heart almost stop. She knew it, her teacher knew what her Uncle Dan had done, and a great panic filled her heart. She had learned it belatedly after his death through a scroll she found in a secret compartment. Her uncle had undertaken the mission to interact with Tsunade, just as many others had tried and failed, but he somehow succeeded where no one else could and made her feel positive feelings for him. But Dan didn't love Tsunade, she was just another mission for him. They didn't even get beyond holding hands and exchanging some sweet words. After all, her uncle had no interest in women and struggled to think about going further. His mission was to secure a higher status in the village, gain access to the Senju's great fortune, influence his partner's decisions, and, above all, permanently root Tsunade in the village. Moreover, he even had to suffer an accident later on in their relationship to make sure there was no possibility of Tsunade having offspring. But Shizun never revealed the truth to her teacher despite it all. She was mentally devastated enough when she left the village with her following. If she had revealed the truth, not only would she terrify herself with what her teacher might do in despair, but she also feared that her loyalty would be doubted. She was genuinely loyal to her teacher, above Konoha and its Hokage. But would her teacher believe her after revealing the truth? After her uncle's death, her clan lacked the cohesion to defend themselves against external conspirators and ended up disappearing. She had no family left but her teacher. That's why, no matter how she behaved or the trouble she caused, she was willing to endure it if it meant being by her side. She felt overwhelming guilt weighing her chest like a mountain. It was too much for her. She started crying hard. She didn't want to be alone in this world. Tsunade looked shocked at her student, and to both of their surprises, Enel actually intervened and spoke in favor of Shizun in such a logical way that prevented the revelation from turning Tsunade's feelings toward Shizun into anger. Instead, she recalled all the time they had spent together and what she had to endure while accompanying her. She realized that Shizun's loyalty was actually much heavier than she had assumed. It wasn't just about sleeping outdoors from time to time, sometimes with their bets, they didn't even have money to eat, and on many occasions, she spent what little they had on alcohol. But Shizun never complained, never gave her a dirty look, and only tried to advise her for her own good. Who in their right mind would still be with her at this point after all she had done? She couldn't blame Shizun for hiding this information, clearly, she was thinking of her well-being rather than worrying about her reputation. Tsunade ended up hugging Shizun gently, conveying her forgiveness and affection through a simple yet meaningful gesture, allowing Shizun's warm tears to flow down her chest, which also muffled her cries due to its breadth. She didn't know how long they stayed like that until Shizun lost consciousness after letting go of everything she had been repressing. Or maybe she ran out of oxygen, who knows. Leaving her on a futon to rest more comfortably, Tsunade met with Enel in the adjacent room, where the air smelled of alcohol. She really had to try to get some bottles for herself later. Thank you, Tsunade lowered her head with genuine gratitude. Although she barely knew Enel and had many questions about how he had obtained such sensitive information, just the fact that he had absolved Shizun of the guilt that had been eating her up inside, which could have turned into an emotional time bomb, was something she would never forget. She wasn't alone after the death of her family, she had Shizun with her, and that was more than enough. Now she had to return to Konoha and confront her teacher and the village's high-ranking officials, demanding answers once she finished reviewing the documents stealthily to avoid scaring the snakes. She raised her head to look at Enel, but she was left speechless when she saw the tall, shirtless man with well-defined muscles and ridiculously long earlobes sleeping, leaning against the wall with an expression of inner peace, as if he had also let go of a great burden from his heart. I guess we all have our demons. Tsunade rubbed her forehead amusedly and lowered her hand to hold her necklace as she continued to look at him. If what Enel had revealed to her was really true. Tsunade sighed with a heavy heart as she gathered her determination. Her grandfather would surely approve of what she intended to do. Chapter 41, Let's go together. The next morning, I woke up to the sun's rays streaming through the window, hitting me directly in the eyes. My first thought was as follows: what a headache. Just kidding. Knowing that I'd be drinking, I naturally prepared a hangover remedy to prevent this uncomfortable feeling from lasting longer than it took to wake up and drink it. Are Tsunade and Shizun not here? I suppose they must be on their way to the village. The remedy I prepared is of high quality, so apart from getting rid of the hangover, it allows me to recall clearly what I did while drinking. It's good to know that my behavior while drinking is just being a bit talkative, rather than other less desirable behaviors. My mantra is actively employed, and contrary to my thoughts, it turns out that the duo seems to be downstairs having lunch while exchanging laughter. Has their interaction become much more familiar and close? It's almost as if, instead of being her apprentice, Shizun is now her little sister. Although maybe it's just my impression. Wait, is what Shizun is wearing around her neck the death collar? Wow, I really changed the dynamics of their relationship with a few words. Am I worried about the girl's possible death? Not at all. With the combined research talent of so many prominent characters, I can gather a great deal of information just by examining the collar superficially with a glance and my senses. And as many fans of the series suspected, the collar actually seems to generate some kind of negative field for men, while with women, it's the opposite. Furthermore, if Shizun wears the collar for a long time at her age, it's possible that her figure will develop much more due to the direct exposure to the chakra-rich vitality crystal. The only man who could survive wearing the collar is probably Naruto, but my theory is that it's not because he has plot armor, rather, it's due to the chakra of the son of the sage of the six paths residing in his body from birth. It simply suppresses Hashirama's chakra for obvious reasons. What he actually obtained, most likely precisely because of the plot armor. And perhaps Sasuke would also survive for the same reasons. Good morning to both of you, I greeted them as I descended the stairs two at a time and crouched to pass through the hallway frame. By now, I'm used to my height, and I don't hit my forehead as often. Good morning, Mr. Enel, Shizun greeted with a cheerful smile and a slight blush on her cheeks. Is she embarrassed because I saw her cry like a little girl? Understandable. Hey! Tsunade, as subtle as always, simply raised her hand while continuing to eat her lunch. How's the hangover? She teased. This made me raise an eyebrow for a second because I don't understand this sudden change in behavior. Why is she treating me with such familiarity already? The last thing I remember is tucking Shizun into bed before falling asleep. I've already taken care of it, I replied as I sat down next to Shizun casually, not realizing that her blush was increasing. I raised my hand to request a portion of lunch. Tsunade stopped moving her chopsticks and looked at me in surprise. With how strong your drink was, it's hard to believe, she said, raising an eyebrow this time. Hell, even I still have traces of a hangover, and that's after treating myself with my best medical jutsu, she added. A pitcher of that liquor could kill an ordinary person. Well, I guess that wouldn't be pleasant, I said as I reached into my pocket and took out another dose of the hangover remedy. Take this, and everything will be fine. To my surprise, Tsunade downed it in one go without even giving it a second look. Does she trust her abilities as a medic, or is it trust in me? Quite perplexing. How long will it? Tsunade's eyes widened as she felt her discomfort completely disappear in just an instant. You have to give me the recipe for this. If I had this remedy with me, I wouldn't need to worry about a hangover the next day, no matter how much I drank. Perhaps later, I told her as I accepted the tray with breakfast brought by the staff. So, what's your plan for today? We're heading to Kaha, Tsunade said with an unconcerned expression after chewing and swallowing. I can't feel at ease until I check things out in person. And after verifying everything. That was the part that personally interested me. Would she kill her teacher, her eye-patched lover, and the two corrupt geezers? Would she forcefully make her way to kill the Shimura clan and the Sarutobi clan to level the score? Essentially, she'd be cutting out the village's cancer, a good job for a medical ninja of her caliber. The possibilities were many, and the consequences even more varied. Although with her unresolved fear of blood, a violent confrontation might be less likely. Do you still want to come with us or not? Wow, it seems like she's not sure if she's avoiding my question by asking me that. Am I giving her some sense of security with my presence? I think I'm overthinking it. Although we've gotten closer and exchanged cups to call it that in a way, I don't think I'm so important to her that I've become someone who gives her that kind of feeling. I mean, just 2 days ago, she didn't even know me, and true trust is something that can only be earned over time. I think I'm overthinking it. Although we've gotten a bit closer and exchanged cups, I don't believe I'm that important to her, to have become someone who gives her that kind of feeling. I mean, just 2 days ago, she didn't even know me, and true trust is something that can only be earned over time. Sure, I shrugged. Do you mind if I bring someone along? I think they'd like to visit the village for a while. Tsunade also shrugged, seeming unbothered by it. She took out my den mushi from my pants and dialed a number. Yes, I have the snail in my pants. It's a living being, so I can't put it in the universal capsules. Tsunade and Shizuan looked perplexed at the snail in my hand, perhaps wondering if it's a distant cousin of Katsuyu. Puru, 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 puru. Kakug. Hey, I'm going to Kaha, I said to the person on the other end. Would you like to come? Chapter 42, Shall we bet? No, I won't give you one, and don't ask again, I repeated for the 5th time to Tsunade as we walked towards Kaha. Let me tell you, I was walking on one of the busiest routes, and the state of the road was pretty bad. Doesn't the daimyo invest in maintaining the roads or something? TCH. Tsunade clicked her tongue, but I think she finally gave up. Or not, but whatever, let's change the subject for a while. I think I should have made the call in private. Tsunade quickly figured out how the den mushi worked during my short conversation, and I don't know if she's thinking about selling it to pay her debts, really wants one due to its incredible strategic importance, or is just throwing a princess fit. By the way, why are we walking? I asked them. Since both of them have gone through ninja training, they should be leaping through the trees. Do you think I want to walk? Tsunade looked at me with an annoyed expression. Although you seem to be in good shape, you don't have chakra, and since you're coming with us, we can't leave you behind. Oh, is she actually being considerate of me? Do you realize I'm actually faster than either of you? I'm not bragging, I swear. I'm probably the most humble person when compared to the original Enel. Just stating a fact here. You seem pretty sure of that statement, Tsunade responded as I could almost see the gears turning in her head as she squinted her eyes at me. How about we make a race and place a bet? She said boldly. Do you even have anything left to bet? I replied without thinking, and seeing Shizuan trying to contain her laughter while a vein on Tsunade's forehead throbbed, I think I hit the mark. Tsunade stayed silent for a moment, apparently considering if she actually had anything left to bet. How about I give you a complete free medical examination if you win? Tsunade played one of her most reliable cards, but I think she forgot something. I'm better at medicine than you, so no, I shot down the proposal without hesitation. And you didn't even say what you want if you win. Do you mind if we make it a favor within reasonable limits instead? That sounds more reasonable. Deal, I agreed. What will be the finish line? The tea and dango stand about 10 kilometers north of the village entrance, just before the crossroads, Tsunade said. All right. On your mark, get set, go, I said calmly as I continued walking with all the calm in the world. Tsunade took a moment to process that I had given the starting signal and then jumped onto the treetops at the side of the road before rushing forward. Shizun hurried to follow her once she also reacted. She's still underestimating me, I sighed. I've seen the speed of Konoha ninjas when they move like this, and I don't think for a moment that Tsunade is as slow as the genin. Since she hasn't seen me fight or anything, I suppose it makes sense that her perception slipped. Anyway, a favor is still worth a favor. There was a flash, and I disappeared from the spot. Much later, at the tea shop by the road. Tsunade was worried that her new friend hadn't caught up yet, even though she had reduced her speed significantly. Although she had a lot of interest in Enel's village's medical books, she also didn't want to leave him humiliated. My friend. Tsunade thought, realizing how quickly she had accepted Enel after sharing drinks. She hadn't made a friend in many years. Most people who still knew her in person were superficial acquaintances, brainless fans, mission clients, or patients. But friends. Two silhouettes appeared in her mind, one belonged to a pervert, and the other had become a traitor to Konoha. Tsunade sighed, hoping this newfound friendship wouldn't be troublesome. Shizun continued to jump behind her master, not noticing the subtle smile on Tsunade's lips, a genuine smile she had lost a long time ago. The two arrived at the rest stop and were about to sit down and order something while waiting for Enel when they saw an unmistakable tall, half-naked figure sitting on one of the outdoor benches, holding a cup of tea next to a plate of pink dangos. I thought a Sunin would be faster, they heard a slight tease. Was she serious? Did she actually lose the race? It was a sure victory. How could she lose to someone who didn't even have chakra? All right, you win, Tsunade sighed in defeat as she took a seat next to him. Let's have something to drink while we wait for your companion. Actually, he's already here. Enel leaned back not to obstruct the line of sight, and Tsunade saw a cute girl with long, dark, straight hair. She was dressed in a very strange ninja uniform and had the same headband as Enel. Hello. I'm Haku. She greeted happily while munching on an apple. Chapter 43, Hurry or you will lose. Meanwhile, in Seimeigakure. Three people were engaged in slow-motion movements, but the sweat running down their bodies and their labored breathing revealed the effort they were putting in. Jiraya was training in the gravity chamber with Orochimaru and Anko, performing a series of gestures and poses designed by Enel to improve flexibility and increase body endurance. Meanwhile, Karin was in the library, studying the latest medical book given to her by her master, while she petted the fur of a cloud fox sitting on her lap. Occasionally, she took a sip of the apple juice next to her. She would have never imagined she could have this kind of life after what happened in the previous village. In comparison, it felt like paradise. Pakura was harvesting some zucchinis and tomatoes in the garden plot with the help of Mariko, who was more than happy to accompany her if it meant staying away from ink and seals for a few hours. Enel had introduced her to some concepts called programming, and she had become a bit obsessed with its potential. So, Mariko looked up from the juicy tomato in her hands. When are you making your move with Enel? What? Pakura was so startled by the abrupt question that she squeezed the zucchini in her hand hard enough to make it burst. Try not to do that with him, Mariko laughed. I don't know what you're talking about. Pakura stammered, unaware of how red her face had become, not to mention how her eyes wandered everywhere, avoiding Mariko's gaze. You really haven't had a partner before, hey? Mariko took Pakura's hand and led her to sit on a nearby cloud bench. Do you really think Seimeikage doesn't know about your interest in Enel? She does. Pakura lifted her head before realizing her reaction. I mean, I don't understand what you're talking about. You know, if you keep this up, I think someone might beat you to it, Mariko suggested. Pakura remained silent for a moment before her eyes widened. You mean? Karin. But that didn't seem entirely correct. Or, you. What? No. Not both, Mariko denied, her turn to be startled. Karin is too young to think about these things, and she's entirely focused on her studies. Plus, I can assure you that Enel has no interest in me. She tested him in secret, and she was pretty sure about this point, which led her to question if she had lost her appeal for a few days. I mean Anko. But isn't she also too young? Maybe, but she shares the same circumstances as you when it comes to knowing Enel. You know, the prince saving the damsel in distress thing. I don't think it's the same, Pakura furrowed her brow. Enel saved me from dying when the village betrayed me by surprise. Anko was just receiving some cold treatment from Konoha, right? I talked to her, believe me, the situation is the same as yours, if not worse, Mariko shook her head. Raza had to deceive you to put you in that situation, but with her, there wasn't even an attempt to hide the intention. People regretted seeing her come back alive from missions. Do you have any idea how shocking such treatment is for someone her age? Hearing the circumstances, along with the fact that Anko was actually younger than her, it really did seem like the situation was worse. At least she was respected in the village. What did you mean when you said Seimeikage would be relieved? Pakura finally asked, connecting the dots with a sudden revelation and feeling a sense of understanding. Don't say it out loud. But you didn't say I was wrong, Pakura pointed out, expecting a protest. Mariko remained silent, which was answer enough. Listen, Karen's mother took the surprised Kunoichi out of her stupor. Seimeikage knows she won't be Enel's only wife, and you've spent a lot of time together, you get along well, and that's in your favor. I think it's best if you tried to go a little further, and if you two became sisters to help her, this would earn you a lot of goodwill from her. Plus, you would feel happy, right? But I really don't know what to do. Pakura covered her face with her hands in frustration as she leaned forward. I don't feel as confident as Seimeikage, nor do I think I can be as direct with my feelings. I haven't even had a date with anyone before. Then do that. What? Ask for it and have a first date with Enel, Mariko said, as if it were obvious. You won't be confessing your feelings directly, but it's classic enough to make your intentions clear. And let me give you some good news, it seems that he's also somewhat interested in you. Really? Pakura asked with a higher voice than she intended. Feminine intuition, Mariko replied. But if that's the case, why hasn't he taken the initiative to approach you? Mariko completed Pakura's question. In fact, I think it's out of respect for Seimeikage. Showing interest is fine since there's nothing wrong with looking, but going beyond that could hurt Seimeikage's feelings. Of course, if it's you, not him, who expresses interest in more than friendship, it's a completely different matter. In what sense? Pakura didn't understand. Wouldn't the result be the same? I really have to explain it to you later, Mariko sighed. It wasn't Pakura's fault, matters of the heart were complicated for someone who hadn't delved into this facet, and there were certain unwritten rules in marriages where multiple wives shared a husband. What she was doing now was giving her the opportunity to gain an advantage over any future rivals. Chapter 44, Smells Good. So, Enel rescued you in the middle of the snow, Haku? Shizuan asked as she walked toward Kaha alongside the cute child. No, the adorable boy. Haku had been very clear about it, and as medical ninjas, even they found it hard to believe at first due to his general physiology, his unchanged childlike voice, and the neutral ninja uniform from his village. His skin was even better than Shizuan's. Haku nodded. Enel didn't interrupt their conversation, knowing that Shizuan was simply trying to find out more about him from a different angle that would seem more casual. Tsunade had been silent since they left the tea house, indicating that she was either listening or lost in thought as they approached the village's overly large gate. It was interesting, the same ninja who had welcomed Enel was about to approach their group until he noticed Tsunade's presence and ran in the opposite direction, most likely to inform Hiruzen of Princess Senju's return. What's your plan? Enel asked Tsunade. The legendary bigwig tilted her head and glanced at him from the corner of her eye without stopping her stride, responding in a low voice so that no one else could hear. Check some things, and then, confront the third Hokage, Tsunade was going to say master, but if half of the things in the book were true, Hiruzen didn't have the right to be called that. In fact, of the three in their group, she was the one who received the least training from the current third Hokage. As the heir to the Senju clan, she possessed all the jutsu scrolls collected by the clan and an unrivaled library that she could access. Her physical and medical techniques were perfected on her own. In hindsight, she had never really learned anything useful from Hiruzen. It was more like Hiruzen had benefited from becoming her master. It was disturbing to realize this only now. Jiraya received the most attention and effort from Hiruzen, followed at a distance by Orochimaru, who also began using his own efforts to pursue his path when he realized he wasn't getting much attention. The same Jiraya who came to believe that he could betray the village his grandfather founded and threatened to kill her if it came to that. The same Orochimaru who crossed moral boundaries by conducting experiments on newborns because his master refused to support him as a researcher. She could have helped Orochimaru stay on the right path, provided funds for a joint medical and research laboratory, and prevented the will of fire promoted by Hiruzen, which was different from that of her grandfather, from brainwashing Jiraya and making him so loyal to the village that. But she didn't. Aren't you worried about leaving them alone together? Tsunade asked Enel, somewhat intrigued. I think Shizune is a good girl. She shouldn't do anything wrong. You know I didn't mean that. Tsunade rolled her eyes as they walked toward the Senju complex. Don't worry, Haku doesn't like killing, Enel replied calmly. If someone crosses the line, at least they'll still be alive when I'm done. Tsunade nodded. Good, it seems that Enel had knowledge of Danzo and his route, she thought. The fact that he didn't kill the village's ninjas is good, it will prevent bigger problems. Enel sensed that Tsunade didn't quite understand the full meaning of his response, but he shrugged it off and followed her. Regarding not killing, he might have taught Haku some advanced anatomy, so his attackers wouldn't die following his wishes. Sometimes, death wasn't the worst thing that could happen to someone. Haku had been learning how to use Senbon quite well and had accompanied Seimeikage during her hunts for bounty ninjas to gain real experience. He estimated that in 2 or 3 years, his ability to paralyze limbs, senses, or leave his enemies quadriplegic would be unbeatable. Enemies were left defenseless, and he didn't kill anyone. Everyone was happy. Well, maybe not the enemies who failed and lost both control and feeling in their entire bodies. But if someone dared to go against his people, he couldn't care less about their fate. Perhaps they could sell the paralyzed enemies to a tribe of cannibals to make some extra money. Or they could sell them to Orochimaru. He never seemed to have enough bodies for his experiments, and subjects as fresh as these should be of great use. So many possibilities. I didn't expect to return so soon. Tsunade's murmur brought Enel back to reality, and he realized they had arrived at the Senju clan's complex. Chapter 45, Senju clan records. The place seems to be well preserved, I observed, noticing that there were no fallen leaves at the entrance, no cobwebs in the corners, no dust on the furniture, and the floor shone as if it had just been mopped. There wasn't a single weed in the entire garden. And it wasn't like the front garden was small, there had to be at least a dozen people maintaining this place in Tsunade's absence, at a minimum. Furthermore, it was clear that they hadn't skimped on high-quality materials for building the clan complex. From what I could see, most of the wood used was Japanese cedar, known for its durability, resistance to insects, beautiful grain, and its pleasant aroma that shouldn't still be present given the age of the wood. And where there wasn't cedar, there was hinoki. I thought it was used to build temples, shrines, or tea houses because it also had its unique fragrance and was resistant to moisture. But here, it seemed to have been used as a complement. Did your grandfather make the wood for the complex? I asked when I noticed the irregularities in the wood. I wouldn't be surprised if both woods were a superior chakra version created by Hashirama's wood release to save on construction costs and empower their durable properties. How did you know? Tsunade turned to look at me, surprised, and confirmed my theory. Well, your grandfather's technique was ideal for building, not just destroying, I replied, trying to downplay my question. I wonder if I can take some wood splinters from here, they could be valuable samples for some of my projects. Yes, it seems that not many people noticed that part, she nodded and sighed, before entering the complex while holding the door open for me to follow her inside. How polite. Maybe she has a better character than I thought when she's calm. That's the thing about meeting characters you read about in person, they reveal facets beyond what's strictly necessary in the story they're in. Oh, I feel how the 7 people who were secretly watching us outside the Senju complex come to a stop and don't enter. Although it looks like they're doing something, some kind of sensory jutsu to continue monitoring us. Is there some kind of pact that restricts them, or do they know that if they cross the line, Tsunade won't stand still and will send them to the hospital? Although 7 people seem a bit exaggerated, half that number might have been enough. What do you want to look at first? I felt the pleasant sensation of the wood under my feet as I followed Tsunade inside. The clan records. For the death rate I showed you. I know it's for that, but I'm curious about what kind of things are in a clan record. Yes. The record includes everything, from financial matters to death dates and circumstances, Tsunade explained. I don't think she likes how silent the place is, I understand her a bit. Does that include your gambling debts? I asked to distract her. She turned to give me a death glare, but I could see her lip trembling slightly as she tried to contain a smile. Did she realize that I tried to cheer her up? What? You said it's all there, I shrugged, trying to put on my best innocent expression. You mentioned that everything's there. My debts are all on a personal account, Tsunade continued walking while grumbling. If they were clan debts, I might have lost a place to return to a long time ago. That was, honest and unexpected. I'm not sure if my attempt was successful or if I touched a sensitive nerve to make her open up like this, in a good way. Tsunade stopped in front of a double door and made a series of hand seals, revealing a large number of previously invisible seals. Yes, it makes sense for the Senju clan record to be protected by a lot of seals, considering that Mito lived here a long time ago. Maybe that's why the watchers outside didn't enter? Perhaps they'll activate some defensive seals or something like that. Come in. Tsunade opened the doors and walked into the room, expecting me to follow her. Wait, did she just allow me to enter the record? No, I definitely misheard that. Are you sure it's okay? I couldn't help but ask, out of pure confusion and an inability to understand her intention. Isn't this a confidential place? It doesn't matter, you have my permission. Enter and help me find what I need, or I'll be here for hours trying to find the right records, Tsunade responded from inside. My mind clicked, it turns out she just wants a couple of extra hands to help her speed up the search. I should have thought of that, it's more in line with her way of thinking. Alright, with your permission, I entered, and I noticed a curious detail. I didn't have to stoop to enter the door, it's a new sensation. When was the last time someone organized this place? This isn't organized chaos, it's pure scroll madness, piled up everywhere except on the shelves where they should be comfortably resting. No one has entered here since I left, Tsunade replied while examining a scroll, which didn't seem to be the right one because she tossed it onto another pile. You mean this place was already like this when you left? My question seemed to paralyze Tsunade for a second, and did I just see her cheeks blush for a moment? Stop complaining and start searching. She shouted at me. Okay, calm down. I can't deal with this sight, it's too much for me. I grabbed a cloth and wiped the dust off the shelves to make the labels readable and see where everything should go. Once I had a mental map of the shelves, I used my speed to collect the scrolls, check their contents, and if they weren't what we were looking for, I placed them in their designated shelf. Tsunade only had time to see a flash before she turned around, surprised, and opened her eyes even wider when she saw everything was so organized, even the scrolls were placed so that they had the same level of depth uniformly. Seeing her expression, I felt like taking out my phone and taking a picture. What did you just do? Tsunade knew what I had done, but I understood her question. I'm fast, remember? I told her as I handed her 6 somewhat old scrolls because of their texture and color. These are the records you are looking for, I think. Tsunade took the scrolls stunned, looking at me, taking a few seconds to look away and check the contents of the scrolls. Yes, it's the clan's death record and all the details. For the next 15 minutes, I watched as Tsunade displayed a plethora of expressions as she read more and more. Chapter 46, Salty Apple. POV Tsunade. POV Tsunade. It can't be. I refuse to believe what I'm reading, but the evidence is detailed right in front of my eyes, and these records in my hands are impossible to fake, thanks to some small measures invented by Tobirama. At first, the deaths I saw made sense, a bit of bad luck, and a mission that was mistakenly classified as C but turned out to be B. It's uncommon but possible at the end of the day. But as I went through the next and the next, a pattern emerged. A simple escort mission ending with all clan members dead, but the merchants and goods mysteriously arriving intact at their destination, as if they were never the real target from the beginning. An assassination mission for a target in a remote location that turns out to be an ambush by ninjas from another village. Patrols with leaked routes, spies whose identity was accidentally revealed, cases where a squad is attacked, and only the Senju clan member dies, and so on. Not only were there too many mistakes to be considered mere coincidences, but I was even more alarmed by the number of times these same mistakes repeated themselves without drawing any attention from the clan. If this wasn't a conspiracy to eliminate my people, then what was it? Did the village my grandfather founded turn against us to eliminate us? No, according to the information from Enel, it was those people. And according to the data, everything seemed to accelerate after my grandmother's death. So, what was on my grandfather's grave? I don't care about the eyes that are watching me. I run to the clan cemetery and check the seals on several members' graves, including my grandfather's and his brothers. I need to see if they really had the nerve to desecrate the dead of my clan. Broken. The secret security seals are all broken? How did I not feel it? The seals should have alerted me even if I were on the other side of the world. The only people who have knowledge of the seals used are me, my grandmother, and Tobirama's disciples. Danzo and Hiruzen. The realization and understanding hit me so hard that I suddenly feel unreal. Strange, I don't feel angry. I thought I'd go crazy if everything was real, but what I feel is more like a void in my heart. Perhaps I knew that these people would be capable of it, but seeing that it's real, realizing that they really dared to do it, it disappoints me. Disappointment? No, it's not that simple. It's more like, as if I no longer feel anything for this place. I kept telling myself that I loved the village my grandfather founded, I felt it, but this isn't the village my grandfather founded, it feels completely unfamiliar. Even the faces carved on the Hokage rock exude an aura of strangeness, as if they weren't the ones I saw almost every day during my life since I was a child. Looking back, it doesn't seem like I left anything behind to stay in this village. Sure, I have the scrolls in the clan complex and the members of my family in the clan cemetery, but it's not like I can't take them with me. The ones that are left, at least. But I don't have anywhere to go. Maybe that's why. Wait. I would like you to join my village. But considering your love for the village your grandfather founded, I know that wouldn't be possible. How about you leave it as if you owe me a favor and I'll use it when you become Hokage? Enel extended an invitation to me. I murmured as I ran my hand through my hair. He seemed sincere, but I know nothing about his village, except that it was founded recently. But that might actually be a good thing from many perspectives. Haku seemed happy, much happier than I've seen the genin from this place. Take a deep breath, Tsunade, suppress your emotions outwardly, focus, and go back to Enel. I need to talk to my new friend. Perhaps the only one I truly have right now. I leave the cemetery, and now that I've calmed down, I realize that the repression seals at the boundary are still intact. It would be more accurate to say they were broken and then put back. I can tell, so what I did in the cemetery wasn't seen by anyone. Not even Hiruzen's crystal ball can observe anything inside the clan complex. When I return to the clan complex, I see Enel lazily leaning on one of the wooden beams while eating an apple. He's sitting on the edge, swinging his legs, enjoying the air without hurry or anxiety. For some reason, just seeing him makes me relax. Hey, I call to him, and he looks at me. Give me one of those apples, I ask. Eating something sweet might help me stabilize my mind. If I were to drink alcohol, I'd probably do something truly foolish and regrettable. Sure, he tosses me another apple seemingly out of thin air. How in the world does he do that? Is it some kind of space-time ninjutsu? Oh, right, he doesn't even have chakra pathways. Yet he founded his own ninja village. I bite into the apple in my hand with force and start laughing, but I feel something warm trickling down my cheeks. It's the first time I've tasted an apple with a salty aftertaste. Chapter 47, It's a pity that they grow up. The third Hokage was in his office, using his powerful crystal ball ninjutsu to supervise the village's security, just as he did once a day. It was a demanding task that consumed his personal downtime, but he was willing to do it as his duty required. Hehe, Miss Tsukasa has grown splendidly, Hiruzen said as he wiped the blood dripping from his nose, the result of the enormous price for using the technique. One of the most vulnerable places to enemy attacks and the appearance of spies was where people gathered. The hot springs were a potential target that he couldn't ignore for the village's safety, as even the most trained kunoichi had to be in that area without their equipment, and they were invaluable assets that couldn't be lost. Hokage-sama. A member of ANBU entered at high speed, and Hiruzen was so startled that the crystal ball almost fell to the floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. Don't you know I'm currently observing the village? Hiruzen roared once he put the crystal ball safely in the drawer. You'd better have a good reason to interrupt this moment that contributes to the village's security, or else. Tsunade-sama has returned to the village, informed the ANBU, fully aware of the consequences of interrupting his superior's important daily mission. Well, Shizune has always been with her, Hiruzen nodded unconsciously before processing the information and falling silent for a second. Did you say Tsunade has returned? Yes, Hokage-sama. She just passed through the gate a few seconds ago, confirmed the ANBU. Hiruzen forgot about the interruption to his crucial daily mission and began to contemplate. Did she come to ask for money for gambling or her debts? No, her student never involved the village in her personal affairs, and she knew how to keep matters separate. That's why he had to order Dan to capture her heart in secret. She was too independent as a senju and didn't understand the will of fire he had instilled in his students. He had only adjusted her slightly with a wiser approach to make it easier for future generations to understand. He didn't expect to succeed, much less that Dan would die before sealing the deal and cause Tsunade to develop a fear of blood. Shizuan's uncle was a real waste. Couldn't he have died before she arrived or done it in a corner where she couldn't see? Let her pass when she arrives, he ordered. Maybe she has finally overcome her fear and returned to support the village. I've given her enough time to calm down. She's not heading here, the ANBU said, dispelling his theory that she would come to report directly. She and her group seem to be heading decisively to the Senju compound. Well, maybe she wants to wait. Hiruzen now realized another crucial detail. Her group. Besides her student, Shizuan, she came with 2 ninjas from the village of Seimeigakure, detailed the ANBU. The first one we know because he was the first ninja from that village we registered, and he had an unexpected encounter with Mikato Uchiha. His name is Enel. But we don't know anything about the girl with him who wears the same headband. Based on our initial observations, she seems too young and innocent to be a genin. Age is not usually a problem for geniuses, Hiruzen said as he contemplated whether it was worth intervening to gather information about this new village. The fact that they didn't even know where it was irritated him, as he couldn't send scouts or spies to gradually gather details. Considering the cases of Itachi, Kakashi, and Shisui, he couldn't help but suspect that this girl might be the emerging genius of the unknown village. Since there was no friendly or hostile relationship between Kaha and Seimeigakure, he was unsure how to proceed. And he still wanted to understand what Tsunade was doing with these people. What was their attitude towards each other? Hiruzen asked, trying to capture more details. Miss Tsunade seemed to speak quite familiarly with the ninja identified as Enel, while her student, Shizuan, seemed to have a cheerful conversation with the girl. I see, Hiruzen nodded as he took a puff from his pipe, which the ANBU didn't notice when he took it out and lit it. If they have a good attitude toward Tsunade, they probably have it toward Kaha as well. Given that the balance tilts in that direction, just keep an eye on them and tell them to come to my office if they show signs of wanting to leave without seeing me. It wasn't the first time Tsunade had tried this. Yes, Hokage-sama. The ANBU rushed off to inform, not liking the smell of tobacco. Hiruzen might seem wise in many ways, but being a smoker simply diminished the ANBU's respect for him. Tsunade has returned for unknown reasons. Jiraya hasn't even come to see Naruto yet, despite being his godfather, and Orochimaru is still wandering outside the village conducting his experiments, the third Hokage sighed. They were much more obedient and cute when they were little. He wasn't worried that Danzo would make a move. He knew that Tsunade should not be touched under any circumstances, and a newly established village that remained so unknown even after several months of investigation wouldn't catch his attention or be considered worth his time. And there are still no traces of Anko, Hiruzen reminded himself. What a shame to lose a young talent like her, one who had attracted Orochimaru's attention and was mentally almost ready to embrace the will of fire. Chapter 48, Apple Pie with Cinnamon. It was in the afternoon when Haku and Shizuan returned to the Senju compound without incident, their stomachs filled with delicious meat and a small bento to share with Tsunade and Enel. However, the inability to obtain information about what was happening inside troubled the ANBU and the root agents. Tsunade should have already gone to look for alcohol or visited the casino following her usual modus operandi, but instead, there was movement inside. However, due to the seals around the compound, they couldn't pinpoint anything. What was the slug princess up to? Danzo's spies thought she might be engaging in some shady dealings with another village, information they could use against her to prevent her from becoming the next Hokage candidate. On the other hand, Hiruzen's ninja were more concerned about the well-being of the last member of the Senju clan. They didn't believe that 2 foreigners could harm her in her own home with her abilities, but the lack of information worried them. Meanwhile, inside the Senju clan compound, Tsunade and Enel had come to an understanding after talking for hours. Currently, Haku, Shizuan, and Tsunade were moving all the clan's documents, research, and encyclopedias to seal them into storage scrolls, storing them in special boxes before sending them to the Shikotsu forest for temporary safekeeping with the help of Katsuyu. Initially bewildered, the wise slug expressed her complete support upon learning the circumstances of their summons and her disappointment at how she had declined such a promising village. At the same time, she got along immediately with Haku due to her innocence, and Enel took the opportunity to consult Katsuyu's wisdom to see if she knew of any way for him to obtain chakra veins. However, there were no new developments on that front. So, Enel thought that while they were busy packing everything, he could visit Mikato as promised. Sure, just go. Tsunade waved him off with her hand while carrying a shovel over her shoulder to start gathering the remains of her clan and not leave them at the mercy of the village. I'll come to get you when I'm done with these two later. Initially, Tsunade wanted to go their separate ways and meet in Enel's village, but that wouldn't serve any purpose since they were not only seen arriving together, but Haku also mentioned that they couldn't reach the village without Enel's help. This left Shizune and Tsunade curious, but they didn't ask. Enel left them a stack of apples to eat when they got hungry and exited the compound while whistling a cheerful tune. The watchers immediately split to monitor him. A few minutes later, inside the Uchiha compound. Enel. Mikato opened the door and smiled at the pleasant surprise. I thought you had forgotten about me. With your charm, is that even possible? Enel responded as he bent down to enter the house. I brought some apples as a souvenir. Ah, you're as kind as ever. Mikato didn't take Enel's teasing too seriously as she rested one of her hands on his cheek and waved with the other, delighted by the compliment her husband rarely gave her. My family loves the apples you bring, they're almost addictive. Really? Enel naturally knew that to be the case, after all, they were the best in the world. Yes, although Fugaku and Itachi might hold a slight grudge against you. After all, Sasuke's first word wasn't father or brother, but apple. Mikato laughed. That detail actually greatly amused Enel on the inside. He could only imagine the faces of both Fugaku and Itachi when it happened. I heard that you can make a fantastic apple pie with cinnamon, Enel said, intrigued. Kushina mentioned it to you. Mikato continued to deepen the misunderstanding that Enel didn't deny, although he had learned about it from the gossipy old ladies in the area when they were casually discussing it a moment ago as they passed by them. I haven't made it since Itachi was born. Wait for me a minute in the living room, I think I have the recipe somewhere, Mikato said. If it's not too much trouble, I would love a copy, Enel nodded as he walked toward the now familiar living room. He regretted not asking for memories and knowledge from someone like Momo Akanigakubo from Food Wars or Alice Nikari. The wonders he could have created with those apples in his possession. Of course, Mikato agreed and confidently left Enel alone. After several meetings, Mikato already had a preliminary idea of Enel's character and wasn't worried that he might snoop around. Most likely, when she returned, she would find him sunbathing. He was such a pleasant and calm young man. Kushina was so lucky. Enel swept the door and spotted a small figure in the living room. Well, what a coincidence to see you here, Itachi. This is my house. Itachi stood up and looked at him with all the seriousness a child his age could muster. Well, there was the hostility Mikato had mentioned. Two could play at that game, squirt. Did I hear from Mikato that Sasuke said his first word? Enel asked, intrigued, as he sat cross-legged and rested his hands on his knees. I'm curious. Tell me, what was your little brother's first word? Itachi almost stumbled upon hearing the question and, when he turned, had activated his Sharingan. So this is the famous Sharingan. Enel observed it up close for the first time despite his several visits. I think it would look better in green or light violet. A vein throbbed on Itachi's forehead, but he refused to engage in Enel's game. He knew he couldn't get any information from this man pretending to be a child, and he also didn't want to be the target of his sharp comments. Moreover, he was a guest in his home, and his upbringing prevented him from casting a genjutsu, as much as he wanted to. How he managed to get along so well with his mother was something he would never understand. No, he had to go see his little brother's sleeping face to calm down and soothe his heart. If only father were here today. Itachi thought, lamenting the absence of the clan patriarch due to an important mission. Itachi. His mother called him by surprise halfway there. I didn't know you were back. Did you see Enel? He's visiting and brought some more apples with him. Tomorrow I'll make my famous apple pie with cinnamon with them. She said triumphantly while waving a recipe card in her hand. Itachi unconsciously imagined the taste of a pie made with those apples and swallowed. Well, as long as he kept bringing apples on each visit, it wasn't so bad. Chapter 49, The Senju Box. Itachi spent some time with Sasuke, and he calmed down. Being with his younger brother was his personal oasis of peace. Although he felt annoyed by the laughter he heard from his mother, knowing it was caused by that man. If Itachi were as mature as he thinks, he would have started to suspect other things by now. He heard someone knocking on the door, but his mother didn't seem to have heard it, so he reluctantly left Sasuke's room and went to see who the visitor was himself. With a bit of luck, it would be his father who had finished the mission early. But when he opened the door and looked up, he didn't see the visitor's face. He had two big reasons that prevented him from doing so. You must be Fugaku-san, Itachi, right? Tsunade didn't see anyone when the door opened and she lowered her gaze, taking a few steps back to get a better look at the child. Heavens, you really take after your father with that indifferent expression. How can I assist you, Tsunade-sama? Itachi recognized the woman at his door, of course, but he couldn't think of a reason that could bring her here. Is Enel still here? Tsunade leaned forward to try to see inside. Itachi's eyes almost got caught by surprise, but he quickly regained his composure as if he had been about to be trapped in a genjutsu. Yes, he's with my mother, Itachi informed apathetically. Would you like to come in, or should I call him? He really hoped for the second option. Tsunade considered for a moment and decided it was better not to enter. Although she wouldn't mind talking to Mikato, she was sure it would take a long time, and it wasn't the right moment. Tell him I'll wait outside. Itachi nodded and quickly went to convey Tsunade's message. He was so happy that he didn't notice the famous Kunoichi's strange mood. After learning of Tsunade's arrival, Enel bid farewell to Mikato, sincerely thanking her for the recipe. Mikato watched as Enel left with Tsunade and narrowed her eyes as her thoughts raced. First it was Kushina, and now she's with Tsunade-sama? If even someone of her caliber is interested, it seems I should have been more bold and open-minded. It's just... Her gaze turned to her older son, who couldn't understand why his mother was looking at him as if she were reproaching him for something. Did I forget to clean my room? Itachi thought, bewildered. Mikato sighed and turned to enter. Her older son was as dense as his father when it came to certain details. She just hoped he wouldn't share his other flaws in the future. How do you get along so well with Mikato? Tsunade asked, a bit perplexed by Kushina's best friend's attitude towards Enel. And for some reason, she felt that her gaze was a bit strange. It's nothing, we just hit it off and exchanged recipes using apples, Enel replied, showing her the copy of the recipe card he had memorized. Tsunade took the recipe and recognized Mikato's handwriting on it. Although it was strange, knowing the taste of Enel's apples, she didn't find it so unusual and accepted it as a friendship formed casually due to culinary interests. Stranger things happen every day. What about Haku and Shizuan? I left them inside the compound, Tsunade replied as they returned to the same place. It made sense, if one of the ANBU asked Shizuan for details and she refused, things could get ugly. For Kaha. What's in the box? Enel asked, noticing a small wooden box filled with dense seals. My last gift for the third Hokage, Tsunade murmured as if only he could hear it. Enel nodded and didn't ask further. If Tsunade had wanted to provide details, she would have elaborated a bit more. Although he couldn't deny that he was curious. You. Tsunade pointed at a rooftop and shouted, come here. An ANBU appeared in front of her, knowing it was pointless to pretend with one of the three Sunin of the village. Tsunade-sama, the ANBU greeted. How can I assist you? Although the ANBU only answered directly to the reigning Hokage, the authority and status that the princess of the Senju clan had were enough for her to give some simple instructions as long as she didn't cross the line. This had also been the third Hokage's instruction, so they were used to it. Give this box to the old man and tell him to only open it when he really needs it, Tsunade handed over the box with the seals. Remind him that if he dares to use it for something trivial, I'll shove his beloved smoking pipe up his. Isn't Tsunade-sama going to see the Hokage? The ANBU grasped the point and interrupted, surprised and nervous. Because the Hokage is waiting for her to come to the office to report. Tell him he can wait while sitting. I'm not going. Tsunade crossed her arms and turned her head like a tsundere would. Well. The ANBU didn't know how to act. He couldn't go hard against her, or someone's life would be in danger. His own life. If only Jiraya-sama were here, there might be a chance of success. Driven by desperation, he could only turn his head to seek help from the other person present, but Enel seemed to be fascinated by the painting on the wooden fence next to the path. The message was clear, don't drag me into this. Tsunade-sama, please. You must inform the Hokage before you leave, the ANBU pleaded. Tsunade looked at him from the corner of her eye, raising an eyebrow as she slowly clenched her right fist, making her point clear. I will relay your message to the Hokage without fail. The ANBU retreated decisively. He couldn't do it, she was just too scary. Maybe he wasn't cut out for this life, he should have inherited his father's cabbage farm. Cabbages can't break your ribs with a punch. Cabbages are good and healthy, they bring in a steady income, and he could have more time to start a family. That sounded good. Decision made. I'll resign from the ANBU. The next morning, Hiruzen found the box on his desk with a note explaining what had happened with the resignation papers of one of his ANBU. He looked at the box with a complicated expression, not knowing whether to be relieved that his student had finally left a way to contact her in case of need or to be annoyed that she didn't even bother to pay him a visit after so long. Chapter 50, Feeling Unwell? Take an apple. The village's exit seemed to go smoothly, too easy if you ask me. This is one of those situations where you know that it's not normal for everything to have gone according to plan. You feel uneasy because you expect or know that someone will do something, but it seems they have some plan that ends up being a major hassle. As expected, half an hour after our departure, I could sense with my mantra several responses from the forest around us, as well as a couple of them underground. Some technique like Kakashi's earth decapitation, most likely. I think I understand their plan. They couldn't find information about our village, and this must be driving them crazy, so they intend to follow us there to find its location or lose our trail to estimate it on the map. A simple direction would save them months of effort, and they could focus their spies on other areas of the map. Too bad for them, there's no path to Seimeigakure other than the Kinton Clouds or me. They're following us, Tsunade comments as she continues walking beside me as if she hadn't noticed anything. I know, I replied. 6 in the forest, 2 underground. Tsunade gave me a look, clearly wanting to know how I can know that when I don't have chakra. No, I added, remembering something else. It's not natural energy, I think Katsuya must have confirmed it for you. So you noticed? Tsunade scratched the back of her neck, feeling a bit uncomfortable about being caught. She had suspected I was a sage, but apparently, she forgot a small detail. Remember that senjutsu requires maintaining a balance of natural energy with chakra. I don't have chakra, so I can't use that either by extension, I explained. Tsunade rubbed her chin, not seeming to realize that I knew a lot about it for someone who can't use chakra. Perhaps there's a third type of energy you're tapping into. She theorized a few seconds later. Brilliant, it must be admitted that when Tsunade puts aside drinking and gambling to think seriously, she has undeniable talent and a terrifying perception. You could say that, I neither confirmed nor denied anything, but I think her interest in my abilities might be higher than I expected. The expression she has right now seems to say, challenge accepted. Another half hour passed, and she continued to ask me some quite intelligent questions, to which I only nodded or shook my head. What should we do about those following us? I asked Tsunade and Shizuan, wanting to know their attitude about it and recalling their presence. We can return much faster if I carry them, and Haku follows us with the Kinton Cloud. Are they following us? Shizuan almost turned around, but Tsunade managed to stop her in time to pretend she stumbled. I forgot that this isn't the Shizuan from several years later, it's clear she still has a lot to refine to reach that point. They've been following us for so long, could the village be located? Tsunade asked a bit worried, knowing the importance of that information. The truth is, I spent part of that half hour thinking about how to deal with their observers. Although I had broken up with the village founded by her grandfather, the break was recent. I couldn't desensitize myself to the place where I grew up in just a few minutes. There's no need to worry about that, I assured her. We can simply lose them, but you're both too slow. I'll have to hold on to you if we want to prevent them from pursuing us when they react. Are you underestimating us? Remind me who won the race. Fine. Tsunade responded, steam puffing from her nose. But you better not try anything. I have a fiancé, I replied with a dry tone, making it clear that she shouldn't get her hopes up. That's true, Haku chimed in to support me as she sat on my shoulders and wrapped her arms around my head, understanding what I was going to do and taking her place. She's heavier than last time, which is good. Although in a couple of years, she probably won't want to do this when she's grown up, so I'll let her enjoy it for now. Haku, what are you doing? Shizuan asked, puzzled to see Haku climb up to my shoulders so casually. Mr. Enel only has 2 arms, Haku replied as if it were obvious. Shizuan understood and laughed while scratching her cheek a bit embarrassed. If I carried both of them, Haku would have to hold on in some way, or they would have to leave him behind. The 2 of them approached my side, and I bent down a bit to hold them by the back of their necks, preventing them from getting whiplash due to the acceleration they would experience shortly. Keep your mouth and eyes closed, I reminded them kindly before elementalizing and shooting off at high speeds. I'm not using all my strength since Shizuan and Haku wouldn't handle it safely, and I'd rather they didn't have any lasting effects. 10 seconds. That's the time I traveled before gradually slowing down to avoid abruptly stopping and having everyone thrown by inertia. Can we do it again? Haku asked, somewhat dizzy but with a smile. Thank goodness they didn't get nauseous, or I would really have to hurry to take a shower. Blerg. Oops, I spoke too soon. Shizuan seems to have some color back in her face and rushed to vomit behind a tree. Tsunade, on the other hand, shook her head to reorient herself a bit and applied medical chakra, as I could see by the green energy in the palm of her hand on her head. No wonder you won the race, she exclaimed as she approached her student and helped her recover. Maybe only the Reikage can match your speed. I wasn't even going that fast, I shook my head, making it clear that I barely exerted myself. I stayed within the speed of race car drivers, around 250 to 300 km per hour, because I know their bodies are robust from ninja training. Haku had me to shield her from the wind pressure, Tsunade is a senju, and Shizuan, well, she had the worst experience. I'll keep that in mind for next time. These are things you find out by living them. Let's take a couple of hours for her to recover and then continue on the path, Tsunade suggested as she gave me an eye twitch upon hearing my response. Shizuan looked at me with a mix of pleading and fear, while Haku looked around bored now that her adrenaline rush had worn off. I really don't want to wait that long. I want to kiss Seimeikage, and then I'll have to accommodate Tsunade, and I have more things to do afterward. Don't worry, I have something here to help her recover quickly, I told Tsunade while waving my hand holding something. A gold apple. Tsunade looked at me as if she expected me to say it was a joke. I think it's time to break her preconceived ideas.
Thanks for listening.